Hey, Joe. Joe. Okay, we're going to call the regular June meeting to order. So if everyone would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, we want to welcome everybody to tonight's meeting. And you might be happy to be inside where it's a little cooler. Those who are watching online, welcome as well. And to anyone who ends up watching after the fact, we appreciate you taking some time to be involved with the school district. 1.04 is our adoption of the agenda. So to my fellow members, we'll take a motion on that now, please.
I move to adopt the agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second to adopt the agenda. Is there any discussion about this? Okay, seeing and hearing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. 1.05 is to an action requested by board members about possibly suspending board policy BDDH, which is in response to public comment. So I would take a motion on that item right now as well.
I move to suspend board policy BDDH only on the time period for this board meeting and allow more than 20 minutes of public comments.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to suspend policy BDDH and allow for more than 20 minutes of public comments. Is there any discussion on this particular item? Seeing or hearing none, all those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Okay, motion carries 5-2. We are going to move on to item 2.01. That is our superintendent's report for this month. And so I will turn it over to you, Dr. Buck.
Good evening, everybody. So usually we don't have a superintendent's report on the same months that we have board priority quarterly update, but I wanted to make an exception this time because we have quite a bit to brag about with our athletics. All right, so let me get into this. LSR7 has 5 individuals who have earned state titles in track. Congratulations in order to Lee Summit West's Brian Haney for state championship in the 300-meter hurdles and Elan Bohr for first place in the discus and shot put. Lee Summit High School's Johnny Brackens Jr. earned state championships in the 110 hurdles, breaking a state record. And if you see the video, it's just amazing. Johnny also earned first place in triple and long jump. West's Michaela Clark earned state championships in the 800 and the 1 mile. And Cindy Banks, also at West, took first place in shot put and also set a state record. On top of this, we had 4 state trophies brought home by our spring sports. Lee Summit West girls took second place in state. Lee Summit High School boys took third place in state. Lee Summit West boys tennis took third place overall. And Lee Summit West girls soccer took 4th place overall. So congratulations to all of our talented athletes this spring that joined a state trophy for second place at Lee Summit North softball in the fall. And then the last was one of the board members. Want to recognize you, and Judy, you'll find a letter from MSBA at your station as well as a pin. It's my honor to recognize board member Dr. Judy Hedrick for earning her master's certification through the Missouri School Board Association. This is an esteemed honor that requires significant study, reflection, and training in addition to already achieving essential and advanced certification. So congratulations to Dr. Hedrick.
Okay, 2.02 is going to be our board priorities quarterly update, and we're going to start with Dr. Barger.
Good evening. I will be updating us on board priority 1 and 2, and then Katie Bergen will be updating us on board priority 3. As we know, board priority 1 is to meet each student where they are by utilizing an equity lens in decisions, actions, practices, and resource support. So I thought, although along the way I had been doing sort of a what have we been doing this quarter update, that now that we're at this point in the year, I would go back to the board approved equity plan, look at each of the action steps, and give an update as to where we are on that given action step at this point in time. That plan is guided by the 6 goal areas of governance and leadership, professional learning and development, curriculum and instruction, student-centered support and programming, parent and community engagement, and recruitment, hiring, development, and retention. So in the small print, but we'll summarize, when we look at that first goal of goal number 1, governance and leadership, the first strategy was to identify and review board policies through an equity lens. And as you know, we've had board updates to policy AC to be inclusive of our LGBTQ+ community. We had the creation of the policy review team, including board members and staff members that we heard about during work session. We've had the comprehensive review of elementary and secondary handbooks, and then we use an ongoing MSBA review process that I would say is much more with an equity lens, having each gone through the professional development that those of us who are now reviewing that process have gone through. We know that the second action step was to develop an equity policy beginning this fall of 2021. And as you saw in work session, we have a draft of beliefs and commitments in place to evolve into a policy that would be up for consideration for review and approval by the board this fall. In our goal area 2, professional learning and development, the first task with a timeline of March 2019 to April 2019 was to select equity vendors. As you know, we selected EEC at that time. We've currently had 8 cohorts of staff members participate in EEC Just Schools, in addition to principal, assistant principal, board leadership training as well. Next year is year 3 of EEC. We've renewed them for 2 additional cohorts. It's actually 1 cohort that's an extension that we were unable to get in this year because of COVID, and 1 additional cohort for Just Schools. But the significant amount of our professional development will shift to the addition of the Core Collaborative as our professional development vendor for 2021-22. And then we will obviously maintain our ongoing internal professional development opportunities that we provide in-house. Then there was a task in spring of 20 to conduct a baseline review to understand current needs and practices. That was largely done through the transition process when I took the role on in the interim position last year. For goal 3, curriculum and instruction, there was quite a bit of tasks to be given, and yet still quite a bit of work to be done, as a good focus of our curriculum and instruction work this year shifted to quickly ensuring that we had online instruction available for everyone. Fall of 19, the goal was to implement an instructional framework model centered on diverse needs of students. You will note that in the CSIP that is proposed for this evening, goal 2, action plan 2, is to embed culturally relevant pedagogy into the curriculum in the standards, resources, instruction, and professional development. We know that the goal, the next action step was to expand the CSIP to include the equity plan, and that was done in a number of ways. The proposed CSIP Goal 2, we will foster a responsive, caring, and inclusive environment, including 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and the overarching theme of CLIMB, including the B of belonging. The third strategy in Goal 3 was to analyze and disaggregate district-wide data that shows trends and patterns of student achievement, and then to monitor that data. That's really an ongoing effort. We've been in front of you a number of times with disaggregated data. We do that for both summative and formative data. From a Goal 4 standpoint, student-centered support and programming, this is largely tied to Goal 2, Board Priority 2, so you'll hear more in detail there. But to enhance a multi-tiered system of support, again, we'll be doing that update via Board 2 here in a minute. To analyze special programming, you guys saw and are excited to see the changes that will be a more inclusive and broader reach for our gifted screening processes. And we continue to look at things along the lines of special education discrepancy data to ensure that we remain in compliance with DESE standards. I would say one thing that we haven't mentioned before is a definite increase to translation skills. In addition to a contract that you approved for translation, we've had a very concerted effort to ensure that all necessary documents are translated and that we utilize messaging out of Katie Bergen's office in a translated format as well. To continue to implement research-based strategies such as EOS, AVID, and JAG, those remain in place, and to ensure that budgets are aligned to school improvement efforts. While we haven't necessarily adjusted how we're budgeting, we certainly have had plenty of available budget within our departments to ensure that the equity work could move forward. From Goal 5, parent and community engagement, this is a place where we have made progress, but there is room to grow. The goal was to create community forums. We did so just prior to COVID happening. We had 2 of the 3 community forums, and then this was right before the original closure. And so we really have not been able to re-engage in that way. To ensure two-way communication and develop a parent advisory group, that parent and community advisory group does exist. We only met 2 times this year. The goal would be to meet at least quarterly. We need to ensure that the value of that group is really action-based and meaningful. And so with COVID and some of the limited work that was happening, we will continue to see that grow in future years. That's definitely an area for growth. To analyze community support, and then the same with Partners in Ed. There were Partners in Ed components of this particular goal that is now very much folded into our career technical education reorganization. So that's a bit of a shift of responsibility as well. In goal 6, with recruitment, hiring, promotion, and retention, we have developed the recruitment, retention, promotion task force between my office and human resources. We've been maintaining data, and we've been seeking feedback and input. We've also done some work at the elementary level, largely Dr. Delsem and Dr. Shelton, in terms of some pool hiring at the elementary level to ensure that we are in a place to hire candidates that are strong and maybe quickly hired or offered offers by other districts earlier to enable that we are able to recruit and retain excellent candidates. And then we continue to work with partnerships along the way to ensure that we have the best employees and also employees that represent our student body. So that would be the end of my update on Board Priority 1. I can either move directly into Board Priority 2, or I can pause and take questions as it relates specifically to Board Priority 1.
Does anybody have questions in regards to Board Priority 1 here before she moves on? I do have 2, but I was going to check to see if others do first. Board Member Marshall?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Barger, could you elaborate a little bit on the increased partnerships with diverse organizations to strengthen potential candidate groups with what type of partnerships? What does that look like?
Yeah, and really to some degree, Dr. Delsem may be able to answer this as well. And I'm going to misname this. Is it Teach? Is that one we were emailing just about today? So one of the groups that we were working with and met with is Teach KC, which is an organization that is designed to recruit incoming interested young people into the teaching field with a focus on all students who may be of interest, but with a renewed focus on students of color or students who may be coming from other marginalized groups and getting them into the teaching field. So that has probably been our first community reach out, and I don't know if Dr. Delsem can think of any others. I would say that's probably the one that we've been in contact with the most.
Board Member Allen?
Yeah, just quickly, will you, thank you, sir, and Dr. Barger, just unpack the all-staff PD in November of 2020. Just what does that look like? What's that include?
In November of 2020, we had a district professional development day in which we asked each of our buildings to dedicate at least 2 hours of time to equity-focused professional development. We wanted to ensure that they had building autonomy to allow that it met their building's needs, but that also we provided structured choices and supports for them. So I provided for them a document with 5 essentially lesson plans of equity-based PD that would last about 2 hours, and they could either take the lesson plan in totality, or I guess you could do sort of a choose-your-own adventure with the lesson plans as well, and to ensure that everyone in the district engaged in 2 hours of professional learning around the topic of equity on that November Professional Development Day.
Any other questions regarding Board Priority 1?
I just have a question. Can you share with the public with the work that has been done with EEC, how does that look moving forward with the new?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we will continue to have the EEC sessions the 2 that we have scheduled next year, which are deeply about self-reflection and stance. How do we walk in the world? How do I see myself in the world? How do we see each other in the world and relationships? So that's very focused on that. The vendor that will be coming in, Core Collaborative, is focused very much on dignity and belonging and the idea of identifying deep belonging through a sense of dignity and a dignity framework. And so there will be a couple of, each school will have a team of teacher leaders and with the principal, and we'll engage in a couple of days of professional learning around dignity and belonging through an equity lens. And then that team will be guided by a coach through Core Collaborative to do some specific planning and change making in their building around the idea of dignity. We've learned together, we go back to our building, we would really like to see this change, or we would really like to see this outcome change, and then collectively build some equity-based action and strategy projects that's building specific, guided by the district work. So what that should mean is that instead of individuals coming out on a pull-out basis to EEC or in addition to, we will now have the ability for all of our staff members to access this training through the work that's happening in their buildings at their sites.
Anything else, Board Member Sparks? Good. Anybody else? Board Member Campbell?
I want to tag a little bit on Board Member Sparks' question, because I think, Dr. Barger, can we just talk about, we've had great updates from you from a district level, knowing that this is now going down to the building level. Will we still continue to track this at the district level as well?
Absolutely. So that will continue to feed through, you can essentially funnel back up through Core Collaborative, through Shelley Sanders' office, and then obviously she will be reporting out to you as well. So we would be seeking out individual plans and or data collection and or progress updates from various buildings. We can funnel that through that office and then provide those updates. That would be an expectation, knowing that it was contract funded with the support of the board.
Anybody else? My only question is, you mentioned then goal 5 that we had stopped the community forums as a result, obviously, of COVID. Do we know when or have any kind of timeline of getting those started again to be able to push more information out to the community?
I think that's an excellent question. In fact, it's a very timely question. Just today, Katie Bergen and I participated with the Lee Summit Chamber of Commerce's diversity and inclusion team. And one of the conversations that the leader of that team and I had was how we might be able to consider collaborating as a chamber, the city diversity team and us as a district, in creating a community forum in which the three of us sponsored it together and created a community-wide approach, so that we are not talking about necessarily what's just for the schools or good for the chamber or good for the city, but what is good for our community.
See, that answered the second part. I don't even have to ask the second part. So how about that? Anything else on board priority 1? Okay, board priority 2.
Okay. Well, board priority 2 has typically been led and updates have been provided by Dr. Kephart, but in her absence, I will be happy to share our updates and our data largely as it relates to our MTSS goal as well. As you know, board priority 2 is to increase the achievement of every child through a focus on innovative practices, student well-being, and enhanced accessibility to educational opportunities. Largely, we look at this through our MTSS lens, our multi-tiered system of support, which identifies work to support students academically, behaviorally, and from a social and emotional standpoint. Within that priority 2, we have a number of goals. The first being student-centered teaching and learning is a commitment to continuous improvement, implementation of district curriculum, instructional practices that focus on cultures, needs, abilities, interests, and learning styles of our diverse students. So we had some goals to support that. We hoped to have 20% of our curriculum reviewed from a process of evaluation. That goal was very much on hold, as I mentioned, as a result of the need to pivot our curriculum work very much to supporting online, but that will come back. We hoped to double the number of online R7 courses. We did that. We went to 1,641 online courses as compared to the 208 the prior year, obviously based on some necessity. When we continue to look at our data, we looked at ACT scores with a hope to increase it from 21.5 to 21.9. Something to be noted that is, while we're at a 22.3, it is worth denoting here that as a result of pandemic, we may be looking at numbers where that some of those lower scores were census testing, where everyone took the test, and we moved to a voucher system, so the 22.3 would not be reflective of the same number of students who took the test. We looked to our staff or to our families and asked if they were satisfied with online instruction. Largely the focus of that was intended to be the online instruction that might be a result of snow days, not the way that we ended up living it, but we were able to see in January that we had 42.9% in report satisfactory responses. To be able to conduct at least 5 professional development sessions to achieve the goal of promoting AMI online. Again, necessity. Of pandemic. The ITS team conducted 16 unique course offerings for staff with 50 plus building support times in 12 days. So in other words, we had lots of professional development on how to teach virtually. Again, necessity provided that opportunity. And then to be able to look at our numbers as it relates to scores on the Shiwitz, and in the 2021, the dyslexia screamer determined 3% of kindergarten through 3rd graders were at risk for dyslexia, which was a decrease from previous years. And we know that we have a substantial struggling reader in an intensive support plan that's currently in effect or in development. We wanted to be able to facilitate each child's realization of his or her academic potential with school environments basically fostering mental, social, and emotional well-being. So we looked to Panorama, our equity and climate survey, for that data, and we noticed that in the fall we were at 76%. And in the spring, we were at 73%. So we did lose a little bit of favorable response in the school belonging category over the course of the year. Sense of belonging, we would hope to see that increase from 47 to over 50 for grades 6 through 12. Same question, different grade span. And we also saw a little bit of a drop. So all the more for us to need to really recommit to that sense of belonging work that we need to do in the fall to bring our students back. And then the idea of developing future-ready environments for our students, and we looked at our market value assets through our real-world planning, and we know that we've counted 1,128 MVAs. Now, these are not individually unique students. Those are individual MVAs, but that's our current denotation, and you can see what that looks like here in a minute as it relates to the chart. So here is the 1,141 MVAs for 2021 as a comparison to the 2020, which was 773. So exciting to see some growth despite pandemic. In the same priority but different goal, district and building leaders will define, develop, implement, and evaluate and revise existing policies, procedures, practices to ensure safe, orderly, and caring environment and productive family community partnerships. So this is that community climate piece. Again, we were looking to that school belonging category, and we did see a little bit of a slip here. So again, a place that we need to continue to engage, not with just our students, but also with our community. Again, looking at the categories, hoping to see an increase of 10%, and we can see that the school safety remained the same. School belonging decreased by 1% in our younger grades. In our older grades, school safety increased by 6%, diversity and inclusion remained the same. Cultural awareness and action increased by 4%, and sense of belonging decreased by 3%. And then we looked to see if we would have a decreased out of instruction time for non-COVID health-related issues. We were unable to determine what was a non-COVID health-related issue in reality. It just became very difficult to measure because it became all very interwoven. And again, here's a glimpse at that climate survey. And you can see to the right, change since spring of 2020 to spring of 2021. And you can see some increase in school safety. That doesn't surprise us, right? Spring of 2020 might not have felt real safe as we had just gone into closure. You can see a slight increase in school belonging with the littles, and then a little bit of a decrease as you look at our other categories. Trusting family and community relationships. Again, we looked to tracking business partners and real world learners and the way we were engaging in community. You know, we've done a significant shift and a huge enhancement of support for our real world learning and community and career areas, but some data to share that we had 521 businesses that were entered into the Transio platform, and that 52 of those 521 businesses engaged in student-centered activities this year, which really is quite a feat because we had a lot of limitation on the ability for volunteers and interactions, so much work to have been done despite the circumstances. And then we look at district and building leaders establish a cycle of continuous improvement that includes reflection, data collection, analysis, planning, feedback, and evaluation. We looked at our attendance rate. Our attendance rate from in-person learning is 93.1%. However, it is a little difficult to calculate our attendance rate knowing that we had varied attendance models, and the DESI's calculations may not make a great year-to-year comparison. From an academic standpoint, when we look at NWEA, we had hoped that we would see the number of students meeting growth by 10% in NWEA from fall to spring. Keep in mind that growth is projected growth for individual students, so you're expected to grow based on where you start, where we'd hope to see you finish. And in ELA, 42% of our students met their own individual growth projections, and in math, 51% of their students met theirs. And there is a take a look right here, because what the diamond will show you is what the national norm is for that grade level and what the observed growth level was in R7. So here's math. You can see where we grew at this. Now, to be fair, and I should look to Tressa, I believe that the diamonds are nationally normed standards from prior years. And so it is difficult to some degree to know, are we measuring ourselves, am I correct, Tressa? Okay, to know that are we comparing ourselves to the growth that others may have experienced during this unusual year. Same would be true in the reading component, where we would see that we did not hit that diamond nearly as much as we did in the math. As we then continue to look at our data, we look at SABRS as it relates to at-risk students, and we indicated that the goal would be in 2021, elementary school grades K3 indicated 5% of students were identified at risk during the fall baseline window, and in the spring indicated 6%. So not a drastic change, but some level of increase there. Decreased time out of instruction by 5%, which we were looking at our focus room data. We actually saw focus room data increase by 10%. However, most of those visits were for proactive reasons. So we would consider, although we want our kids in the classrooms, we would consider that to be a fine reason to be in the focus room. And then when we look at our SEL data, our social and emotional learning data, we again look to that school belonging data that we've referenced prior to Panorama, which indicated a little bit of a decrease. And then when we looked to the MTSS work, there was some limitation to the MTSS work that we could conduct, largely because it is a very large group meeting, and we did not convene our entire group this year to continue the work. Much of that work happened in small pockets, largely led by Dr. Hill, Dr. Mathis, Dr. Keppard, and others. Engaged leadership is really about our principals and leaders having a deep understanding of MTSS process, district and building leaders understanding the development of it. And we looked to Team Lee Summit survey as one measure of that. Does my supervisor enable me to perform at my best? We can see that in the 2021 Team Lee Summit survey, 81% of our school-related positions surveyed favorable to that question. And into the question, I have the training needed to address the diverse needs of students and or staff at my workplace. We hope to see that increase from 62 to 68%. It increased slightly to 63%. And then again, instructional leadership and positive culture. When we looked at our NEED teacher survey, this is the data that is gathered via the NEED process, the evaluation process. The question, my principal expects me to provide effective instruction for student achievement. We hope to see that increase from 2.8 to 2.9. It was noted at 2.5. We do wonder if pandemic and some of the messaging from past years may have, or last spring may have impacted some of that. And then my principal promotes a positive school climate for all students. We hope to see that increase from 2.7 to 2.8, and it was noted at 2.6. So it remained a little bit of a drop. So we'll wrap up the priority 2 by just a quick reminder that while there's lots of data there, we continue to look at lots of data for every one of those things. Dr. Keppard probably could have picked dozens of other data sources. That's a sampling. But we continue for the instructional focus to be on our instructional compass, looking at culture, achievement, well-being, and equity, shifting also to that idea of climb as we begin to move to our CSIP. The Diploma Plus from our real world learning of explore, ignite, and experience, and the end goal being that portrait of a graduate. So open to questions, and if I don't have the information because it was not my data collection, I'll be happy to follow up with information that I can gather for you.
Board Member Hedrick.
Thank you. Really, I have a couple of questions, but it's mostly kind of along the same line, and it's really in regard to like the ACT. Mm-hmm. The total number of tests taken compared to past years. And so, and the same thing with some of the data that you've provided here on the some of the survey information, mm-hmm. How many students actually participated when compared to the prior. I think that would help me at least put that in perspective. If you know, that we might expect to see some of the decreases or changes because of just the pure numbers were different. So I would like to see that information at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can get you Panorama participation data from last year to this year, fall, spring, and then ACT participation. We had census testing and then the shift to voucher-based testing for this year.
Right. And then is there any relationship to the information on the knee that would be also be explained by numbers, or no?
No, I don't think I don't know that the knee probably is impacted by numbers because we would still have held the same number of teachers to provide the survey data for for principal evaluation.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
You bet.
On the knee, I'm going to follow up on that though, just while we have a quick moment. Mm-hmm. Can you give the relative scale for that? So if we were 2.8, 2.9, now we go down to 2.6. That would be helpful information in terms of understanding the true drop that we saw.
Do you know off the top of your head? A 3.0, you think? We don't officially know. We're having a little bit of a conversation here, but I'll get it for you. Okay. He's thinking 3.0, but I don't want to give you that answer without confirming.
Okay.
Yep.
Board Member Marshall.
Thank you. My questions are coming from, they're data-based, coming from about slide 14. So for the grades 3 to 5 that were captured, and then grades 6 to 12, can we know of, like, for grades 3 to 5, of the 2,977 responses, how many did not respond, and possibly what those factors, what those reasons might be?
Yeah, absolutely. We absolutely have a participation rate by school, and we have a participation rate or percentage by school, and I think probably that is the best. We certainly set the expectation for this survey to be an expected, but we knew that due to some circumstances in the spring that we may not have full participation. So I can get you a breakdown of how many students in each school took it, at what grade level, and what
Right.
percentage of that school that represents.
Okay, thank you. That would be
bet.
helpful. Another part to my question, when you talk about on this, again, slide 14, the climate and equity survey, and for grades 3 to 5, when they're being surveyed on things like school safety, what kind of questions are being asked to get that response? And same thing with grades 6 through 12 when they're being asked the 4 categories of questions here.
You know, that's an excellent question. So there's all sorts of questions, and I will tell you just for the public's benefit, and I can get you a link, but just for everyone to know, all of our Panorama survey questions that are asked in any of the categories are in PDF form, linked to the equity page on the website. So you can see the actual questions that are asked in each category and each age range. So, you know, I wouldn't know the exact question, but questions along school safety is about, I have a trusted adult that I can go to in my school environment. I know where I would need to go if I need help, things like that are those questions. But again, happy to send them to the board, but for the public's benefit, they are linked. If you go to the equity page and then under FAQ, they are linked there, and that is for not only the the equity and climate survey, but also for the sense of school safety and the sense of belonging one.
Thank you.
Board Member Allen?
Thank you, Ryan. Dr. Barger, where, slide 13, right, board priority 2, student-centered teaching and learning, right? How does 13 and 23 intersect? Are they using SABRES, right, versus, I'm just curious, it's some of the same content and percentages seem the similar.
13 and 23. I'm wondering if maybe my slides aren't matching yours, so maybe
Oh,
you can.
sorry, just
No, it's
page,
okay.
whatever, I'm not sure, but basically engagement, facilitate each child's realization of his or her academic potential by enhancing, right? So it comes to belonging, ideally utilizing Panorama. We went with 74 to 80%. Yeah.
Here?
I guess that's 15.
Okay.
Yeah, on yours, mine's 13. So yeah, and then sort of 23, it's very, very similar. But it mentions SABRES in.
Okay, that makes sense to me. So, so one of the things that we're talking about as we measure in terms of at-risk behaviors, and as we also measure sense of belonging, those two things both can be measured to some degree utilizing Panorama, but SABRES would be an add-on as it related to behaviors.
Okay, so 23, or well, sorry, the later slide. Is behavior utilizing SABRES schools will decrease students identified by risk, right?
Yep.
And the percentages are really about the same.
About the same, and that is a, and Dr. Hill could certainly talk to, do you want to talk a minute to SABRES about what it is and how it's calculated? I think that might be helpful real quick, just a 2-second.
And we're quite a bit under our goal, it appears, but is that wrapped around some of the, or am I just reading this incorrectly? I'm not sure, but is some of that wrapped around the pandemic and challenge and what sort of history do we have to draw on, which probably not much since we just started using the tool, right?
So SABRES, thank you for the question. So SABRES is a screener that our teachers fill out about students. So we have teacher perspective of student behaviors. The Panorama SEL survey and the Climate and Equity survey is student responses. So we have teacher perspective and student perspectives. And some of the topics may be similar, but not, they are two separate survey screeners. SABRES has been utilized probably for the past 4 to 5 years that our teachers have been utilizing that. And it is a norm reference screener that's K-12 norm referenced, but we typically have used it only at the elementary level. So did I answer all of your questions?
And then historically wise, I mean, a lot of history there to compare success.
So in the first couple of years, we had some pilot schools with the RTI work that the elementary schools had been doing 4 to 5 years ago. And so there was a group of elementary schools, early adopters, and we ran them through those processes first. So to do some comparative across all elementary, we just recently have all elementary schools participating in that. So, but that's something that we could get you. Sure, thank you.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Dr. Hill. Just curious, is when you mentioned that that was only elementary, what's the rationale for that?
So as we are building our MTSS framework, we are working with the secondary schools to see how that could be developed across the secondary level. It's going to look different because of the master schedule and so forth. So that is some of the work that we have been doing over the last several years.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, Board Member Fritchie. We're getting some reports that people are not hearing us very well. Is that accurate? Not accurate? Accurate? Okay. So try to speak real close into your mic if you need to, or maybe Jeremy can bump the volume up just a little if necessary. Oh, he's going, no, don't do that. So
Okay.
talk a little closer to the mic.
All right, I will do that. Thank you. I'm referring to the student belongings slides and the data analysis on those, I think starting on probably about 20. When you talked about some of the results of these and the percentages, it sounded like you said something about the students setting those for themselves. Do the students set those goals or do adults set those for them?
So I think maybe there's two different things that you might be considering in that. So from the NWEA data, that is a test, student achievement testing data. That's not a goal in terms of, so when we look at, and I'm going to see which direction I need to click to get here. When we look at the one that had the triangles, right? This is met the growth goal, but the growth goal is set statistically. So for example, if Kim's at a 172 and Christy's at a 180, it might say, well, other kids who are Kim's age with a 172 earn 5. So we would expect to see her at a 177. Other kids with a 180, whatever the number I gave myself, typically grow 3. So we would expect to see her at a 183. So what this measures is what percentage of our kids actually met the goal that was set for them academically.
Okay.
On the perception data, that is truly just students answering the survey for themselves.
So they don't set a goal for themselves. They just answer it honestly.
It's just survey. Now they might be having conversations at the levels with the results, but not formally.
Okay. And I have a second question. On slide 25, and we're talking about the Team Lee Summit surveys. When it talks about training, Team Lee Summit survey question, I have the training needed to address the diverse needs of students and our staff at my workplace, and we wanted that to increase from 62 to 68%, and we achieved a 63%. Could I ask you, what do you think are indicators of that we didn't achieve what we had hoped to achieve?
Well, I would think, I would hope, I would wonder, let's put it that way. I would wonder if maybe when we get to every single staff member having much more in-depth access to the training in a way that Core Collaborative will provide, as opposed to the, opting into the pull-out training, which, I don't have the exact count, but I think it's close to 300 people who've engaged in just schools. But I think the idea of shifting from that place of reflecting, shifting from that place of stance about self into some very concrete strategies, I think is the next step. So I would hope to see that grow. I think some of the work that needed to happen and still needs to happen with the curriculum and resource review, to be able to empower our teachers to have ready-made resources that allow them to sort of grab and go and feel supported in that kind of learning for students also is helpful. I think the work that we're talking about in terms of diverse needs of students is very interconnected, likely to our intensive reading RFP, to our TIPS RFP, having the interventions and tools that we need once we have students who we know have need. So I don't know that I even see that as so much just equity as much as it is, do I have everything I need to, when I know what what I think the student needs, do I have the resources to come in behind with that?
Okay, thank you very much for the clarification.
Board Member Hedrick, did you have another question?
I did. Sorry, I should have asked it earlier. It's on the two slides that had the little triangles. I think you mentioned that that was national data from a year ago or maybe 2 years ago. Will they be updating that at some point where we would have then more comparable triangles compared to what we did in Lee Summit?
So I'll look to try statistically, historically, let me put it that way. Historically, NWEA renorms every few years and then to account for the change, and then they use the most recent norming study. I don't know, and Teresa, you may know better, Dr. Wright may know better, if there is a plan to specifically create norms for the pandemic year, because really what we're looking for is, did our individual rate of growth, how did it compare in others during the year of academic
Right, and
disruption?
I just think there's a lot of, not only in the state, but nationally, educators having that very conversation. So I just think it would be really good information for us to be able to look at that. So just was curious.
You are correct. The norms that you're looking at here were from 2020, so they are comparing us to pre-pandemic. I have had multiple conversations with NWA recently about where do we stand with our pandemic work and in relation to nationally and or locally. And so I've spent some significant time talking with them. There's another study that they're doing that will come out with the results this summer. Their researchers are digging in to see the biggest areas of impact from the pandemic time. So I will be coming back to you guys in July with more detailed information at our board work session about where we are locally with our results here in Lee Summit. So this is just a very broad overview.
Any other questions around Board Priority 2? Looks like Board Member Sparks.
Just a real quick question. When we look at slide 18, and when you see that we're down in the 3 areas of diversity and inclusion and cultural awareness and action and then sense of belonging, and we see that we're down, what do we attribute to us being down? And if we don't know, then what type of actions, what are the action steps to find out what we can attribute to that so that we are on par where we need to be?
I don't know. I don't know that we'll know for sure. I have some hypothesis, and it's too easy to blame COVID for all things, right? But I do wonder that as we were shifting from learning modality to learning modality, that potentially we may have had instructors sort of focused on like just the facts, ma'am, like let's just get right at instruction, and maybe some of that supplemental work that would normally have been infused into classroom environments didn't become the priority as much as it was skill acquisition and supporting any credit lag. It's a hypothesis. I don't know if that's the case. I think one of the things we also want to know is that this is the second year that we've taken this survey. And we have much more substantial understanding of the survey by our building leaders and by our building teachers. And so, for lack of a better phrase, buy-in from the students about the importance of the survey. Conversations with students prior to taking the survey will just continue to enhance. The more teachers are seeing the results of the survey and the students are feeling the results of the survey being meaningful. So I think there's also probably some of that with all right, I'll take this, but without necessarily knowing all of the importance of it. So we hope to see that grow too.
Just a quick follow-up. When are the surveys taken, and in what setting are they taken?
They are taken in the fall and the spring, and in the winter, except the culture and climate one is not taken in the winter. The equity one is not taken in the winter. Each school gets to determine how they're given. Typically, that's in a classroom space at the elementaries, so they designate a time to give it. High schools, middle schools might give it during an advisory. They might give it during everybody's going to take it during ELA, but it's given in a classroom by a classroom teacher. So again, some of those results may be impacted by how you tee up the survey for the kids.
Anything else? Okay, good. Any other questions on this priority?
Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Barger.
Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to present on board priority number 3, which is strengthen communication that builds engagement, collaboration, and confidence with both internal and external district stakeholders. So this spring, we really engaged with our patrons around strategic initiatives. That was sort of the theme of the spring. Incorporated collaboration where we could through primarily surveys and engagement events. And we had somewhat of an unusual situation with our two primary strategic initiatives, which were our bell and bus schedule revisions and our boundary study teamwork, in that when we were surveying our community about these initiatives, it required our patrons to do some homework. A lot of times when we're surveying our community, we're asking them for their response to something they can sort of easily answer. This was two situations where it required people to read through a lot of information and look through a lot of visual maps, etc. So we tried to remedy that and take some work off of our patrons' plates by doing something a little different, incorporating an overview and walking our patrons through some of the more complicated aspects or nuance of these proposed changes directly in our survey tool. I will tell you, I think that worked effectively for one of these and not so effectively for another. We had about 5,000 people engage with our bell and bus schedule revision survey and overview. When we did a similar approach for our boundary study teamwork, we had about 700 respondents engage with that survey. So the good news is I think we were able to garner some rich feedback that will inform your decision about bell and bus schedules tonight. When it comes to our boundary study teamwork, we know that this engagement series was one of two, and that we will have another engagement series around proposed middle school boundary drawings in September. So I think that leaves us room to sort of improve the way we present these drawings to our parents. When it's in an online format, it seems to work pretty well in person, but room for growth there for sure. We are getting new websites in LSR7, as you know. Last month, you approved a redesign contract with a company called Final Site for all of our district websites, excluding high school, to be redesigned prior to a January 2022 launch date. And so that has meant that the PR team, who's going to be taking over website management from technology, has started a very long and arduous process of preparing, starting down the road on our website journey. We had our first meeting with our project management team, and if it was a cartoon movie, it would look like the project managers like unfurling a scroll that went for 17 miles as we saw the tasks and pieces that we would complete. That's a good thing. One of the reasons we chose Final Site is because they're going to build us websites from scratch that are custom made to meet our needs as we describe them. So one of the things that the PR team has been facilitating is feedback sessions and surveys with our webmasters and building administrators who've been advising us on the kind of website and design and navigation that will serve our community best. We also have a name for our fourth middle school that will come before you on the agenda later tonight. We convened a naming committee this spring who worked to determine 3 proposals as far as a name, mascot, and school color packages goes for our fourth middle school. But our process really started in March when we had an open submission process for ideas for the name of the fourth middle school. That process was open, that submittal process was open from March 1st through April 11th. Folks could submit ideas online, and we also took ideas via mail to the PR office. So the middle school naming committee met weekly from April 21st through May 19th to vet those ideas. All recommendations were made by consensus of those members present, and Dr. Whitney Moorhead, principal of the fourth middle school, and myself facilitated those meetings. And we are just grateful to the 350 respondents who submitted ideas for that process to us. So there's a picture of the team there. It was comprised of 14 people with at least one parent, staff member, and student from each middle school feeder area. And you'll see those 3 packages before you. Those will look familiar to you. So for our public listening, our board saw our 3 finalists for the first time at their board retreat last week. and submitted a finalist to the agenda to be approved or considered later this evening. One thing I do want to mention is a popular a submission for us, which was some version of Bailey Farms Middle School, Bailey Middle School, which is a reference to the family that owned the land where the middle school is being constructed for many, many, many years. And so we had a lot of submissions suggesting that the team choose to name our fourth middle school after that family. And I wanted to say and just mention that the team took those submissions really seriously. We actually had a historian come in and visit with the team and talk about the history of that family and their role in the community for the past 100 years or so. But ultimately, the team decided to move away from naming the fourth middle school after an individual. There's a couple of reasons for that. I think to some degree they took very seriously the burden of vetting the name of a school and naming a school after an individual, especially, regardless of whether one who's living or dead. They wanted to make sure that we had sort of a clear rationale that someone whose name gets on one of our buildings has a very clear path to that, has clear contributions they've made to, particularly to our school community. And to some degree, I think they were a little concerned about Bailey overkill in that subdivisions out there, streets are named Bailey, that would just be one more thing and may not have the unique footprint that we would want for our new middle school. So you guys will have the opportunity to consider East Trails Middle School, mascot bison, colors green, black, and silver, later on in the meeting. Finally, it was really great this spring at the end of the school year to return a little bit to normal in the sense of having in-person celebrations for both our retirement reception and our bond projects. So pictured here is our retirement reception that we were able to hold outdoors and indoors at the Missouri Innovation Campus in early May, as well as the groundbreaking ceremony for Lee Summit High School. And we know that we're continuing to update our public on progress made on our bond projects at lsr7.org/bond. And finally, I'll leave you with just some pieces from our storytelling team. This spring, we have our 5th issue of Our Schools hitting mailboxes right as we speak. Some of you may have already received them in the mail. Rebecca Hange, our creative services specialist, took excellent and beautiful photos of our graduation ceremonies that were held for the 2nd time at Children's Mercy Park. And we're continuing to experiment with our podcast platform. We're excited for next year. One of our goals as a team is to make our podcast content a little more recurring, move it from the sporadic space to the reoccurring space. So that's something you'll see us prioritize in the fall. And that's the end of my presentation. Happy to answer questions if you have any.
Any questions for Ms. Bergen? Board Member Campbell.
This is more of a statement than a question. I just want to reiterate and highlight and thank you for the inclusion from the community around these surveys. The thought that you've put in, the work that you've put in to gather input around bell schedule. 5,000 respondents, I think that's great. I'm encouraged to hear how many people responded around that. Appreciate all the hard work that you did around the boundaries, because we know we've gone through gathering feedback from the community, asking questions, and this decision around these boundaries with our 4th middle school is really important. And so glad that we had that. I really also want to appreciate the committee around the boundaries, and that night of, I think there were 2 nights of coming and getting to hear from the committee and understand the thought that the committee members were putting into these decisions and recommendations. Really appreciate that, and you sharing that story as well. And then also with the naming committee, the hard work that those folks put into evaluating all of those inputs from the community and really, to your point, vetting that and thinking carefully about what's best for this middle school that we know our students will be going through for many years to come. And that's exciting to have committee members and the community engaged as a part of that process. So I just think when we talk about transparency and we talk about including the community and including our staff and in these decisions that sometimes are very tough for us because they're impactful, that I appreciate the work and the effort that your team goes to. And I just want to say for everyone here in the room and that are watching, thank you for participating, because this is important work and it helps us so much. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you. I do want to give a shout out. It was a pleasure working with the naming committee and the boundary study team committee this year. But what was especially cool was working with the boundary study team, who took a special interest in communication this year and really wanted to be involved and said, look, we don't want the communication to come to you. We want the community to understand that it's, fellow parents and fellow staff members who are evaluating some of these boundary possibilities on behalf of the public and our school community. So make sure the message comes from us. Let's make a video together. And so that's something that was fun to facilitate from PR side.
Any other questions on board priority 3? Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate it. We are going to move on here to our 4.01, which is our public comment section here. And so before we get to the public comments, I would ask for Board Member Hedrick to go through kind of the ground rules if you are one of the people who are giving a public comment tonight.
Thank you. We appreciate your attendance and your willingness to speak to the board. Please adhere to the following requirements. Please remember, while this is a meeting held in the public, it is not a public meeting. The board does not respond to public comments during the meeting. We want to hear what you have to say, and your comments will be noted by the board, and if appropriate, we will direct the subject to administrators who are responsible for that particular subject matter. As parliamentarian, I'm going to exercise my authority to keep comments to no more than 3 minutes tonight, pursuant to board policy BDDH. Your allotted 3 minutes will be counted down on the screen. When the timer expires, please conclude your remarks. Only those who have signed up with the board secretary prior to the meeting will be allowed to address the board. Board policy BDDH does not allow for discussion about individual faculty, staff, or students during open session, even comments that do not mention individuals by name. Comments concerning individual faculty, staff, or students may be directed to the superintendent privately, and if necessary, those issues may be discussed during a subsequent executive session of the Board of Education. Lastly, when your name is called, go to the podium and clearly state your name and the organization you represent, if any.
Thank you, Board Member Hedrick. I will make sure and announce who is following, so just to kind of be prepared in terms of the order. So our first speaker tonight is going to be Christy Ingman, and then that will be followed up by Devoya Marshall will be second.
Good evening. My name is Christy Engeman, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak during the board meeting tonight. I am a member of the Lee Summit community, a member of Suburban Balance, and most importantly, a mom to 2 children here in the LSR7 district. The public comments last month and the continuous mention of critical race theory and how it's being taught in our schools and indoctrinating our children brought me here to share a brief insight for those who are willing to listen, as well as to remind administration that you do have support for the equity plan, as well as reemphasize the need for progress. Critical race theory is not the same thing as our equity plan. CRT is a theoretical framework that is typically used in research. It's a theory. It is not taught in the classroom. Part of the equity plan is to look for opportunities to update curriculum and make it more inclusive. Look for ways to diversify teaching and to update the curriculum to teach the whole truth of history to our children. And we need to support our staff in doing so. We need an expanded social justice curriculum and LGBTQ inclusive sex education. We need additional staff to be trained in trauma-informed care. These topics and conversations can be uncomfortable for some adults to have, which can lead to misunderstanding and unacceptance. The unease can lead to reaction that if I'm feeling uneasy, it must be wrong, and therefore my children should not be taught in this way. When in fact, that uneasy feeling is the opportunity to learn from someone else's reality and to accept them in their reality for who they are. Teaching children that other families can look very different from each other is okay. A book that has a same-sex relationship or blended family is okay. It is simply teaching our children that different realities exist for others. It teaches our children the invaluable lesson of understanding and acceptance of how others live. Another example, adding literature to the curriculum or library that is written by a black or Muslim author from their viewpoint does not invalidate the viewpoint or story of the white or Christian author. It simply helps our kids who are in a minority see themselves in everyday life. It helps them feel seen, heard, and accepted. It allows our white children to have the opportunity to see the world from another angle, or see that although they look different on the outside, feelings are the same. And all I can see is the good and the opportunity for everyone. Social and emotional well-being are required for academic success for every one of our children. Equity training for our teachers is imperative so mistakes in our teaching history are not repeated. Curriculum updates need to happen. All of the mistakes that we have had are learning opportunities. A greater understanding can happen, but without open discussion, without training, without support from the administration, change will never happen. Thank you.
Our second speaker, just so I can give the third speaker, okay? Devoya Marshall, but then next up will be Ashley Alshawish.
Good evening. My name is Devoya Marshall. I'm a Suburban Balance mom and a member of the equity team. My husband and I are new residents of Lee Summit, and our four boys are new students in the district. I must admit that I was hesitant about the move to Lee Summit, especially with the recent publicity revolving racial issues that not only reached local but national news. However, the opportunities for our children are a priority, and I felt that Lee Summit was in a season of change. One of our first experiences in the district was with the Gifted program. My youngest son had been placed in the Gifted program in our previous district, only to be told that during a year of a pandemic where learning had been altered, that he did not qualify for Lee Summit's Gifted program, but that he was very smart. There have been several testimonies of other minorities with the same experience. We need a clearly defined explanation of the process of placing students in this program to ensure the process is fair and equitable. To the board, thank you for approving the first step of the equity plan. It is a step in the right direction, but we still have plenty of work to do. We need to see equity on the actual agenda and not just being addressed in public comments to ensure that it gets the proper attention required for change. We need to hear updates on how you are supporting Educational Equity Consultants, the EEC, which was approved to provide training in regards to educating our students and staff about issues regarding cultural competency and racial sensitivity. That training would help prevent situations where teachers verbalize the N-word in the presence of students, regardless of the situation or the comfort of telling a student she's pretty for a black girl. If you need more examples of why equity training is necessary, take time and read tweets with the hashtag #OurStruggles LSR7. Representation matters. This summer, I remember the feeling my elementary kids and I had driving up to the summer school, being greeted by a black male teacher. It was exciting to see someone who looked like my children and help them feel like they belonged. It is important to have a diverse staff to help understand and provide the needs of all children. There are many well-qualified, highly educated individuals that have applied yet not hired. The recruiting and hiring of minority teachers needs to change immediately. I know the oppressed feeling, being at times the only black student while pursuing my bachelor's in biology and master's in project management. It provides for a better learning experience when you are comfortable in your environment. In closing, the Bible mentions in James 1:19 that everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Many of us fail at this. We become so accustomed to responding that we don't even think about the thoughts and feelings of others. If we actually followed the golden rule to love our neighbors, the negative changes would not feel like a burden, but result in a blessing. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Ashley Alshawish, and then Rachel Gary.
Hi, my name is Ashley Alshawish. I'm a parent of 2 students that are currently enrolled in this district. I can acknowledge that due to COVID, you all were faced with tough decisions last year, and it would have been impossible to make everyone happy. Through May of 2020, those decisions seemed mostly reasonable to my family, and I felt confident until midsummer. At that point, it seemed as though this board constantly insinuated fear over free thinking, and it seemed like you cared more about statements from corrupt politicians than forming your own opinions about the data that was being released on COVID within our community. Time after time, you insinuated fear rather than free thinking, and I was sad to see that neighboring districts in which my family had considered moving to made safer choices for our kids in regards to masks. So several months ago, my husband and I decided to start networking within our community with like-minded parents. We want the freedom of choice regarding masks and vaccinations required within schools, particularly regarding the COVID-19 vaccine. And we wish for this district to remain open in person for the entirety of the 2021-2022 school year with no segregation of the student body of any kind. Throughout the entire process of getting to know many parents and other concerned citizens, I've learned of the term critical race theory, or CRT. CRT is counterproductive to all anti-racism efforts. Further, many families have shared stories with me that involve our local schools neglecting to inform parents of serious situations, failure to call the police in dangerous situations, and lack of general communication regarding disciplinary action. I have been shown very inappropriate sexual content within curriculum that is not related to sexual education, and this information makes it very hard to keep my students enrolled here. How can I know that they will be safe? To those points, I'd like to pose questions directly to this board. Why do you allow your principals to neglect telling parents about serious situations involving their children? How does this group plan to start responding to concerned constituents? Why have so many people seen no response to their emails at all from you? I believe our educators should promote free thinking and encourage student educated opinions, and so that I also ask, why are you sending emails to parents that go as far as to insinuate how to vote on a bill rather than just what the bill says? Why has a group of people that should be passionate about education starting to sound like our news stations? Lastly, I'd like to inquire how often you fact check anything you read on the internet. I've recently read several articles published both domestically and internationally that imply the same thing. The American freedom experiment is about over. Do you realize that each and every one of you have the power to help make that statement true or false through the decisions that you make here for our kids? We beg of you, stop all CRT efforts and get back to the core subjects of education. We are tired of seeing educators misinterpret Marxist concepts and local school board members either ignoring us or refusing to acknowledge what their decisions are doing to future generations. Thank you.
Rachel Aguirre, and then our next speaker will be Cynthia Shoto.
Hi, I'm a parent and an educator in the district. And it's supposed to be our jobs as educators to always let our students feel safe, no matter who they are, regardless of their race, their sex, even their orientation. Our job as educators is to make sure that they feel safe in our classrooms. And that is not the case in the school district right now. Kids are being non-verbally intimidated to support either the LGBTQ organization or BLM when that shouldn't even be the case. What we should be teaching is our kids to respect each other regardless if we agree with them or not. And that is not what's happening. What we're doing is we are incorporating a curriculum that divides. Equity is not about bringing unity, equality is. Equity says that everybody should be able to attain the same goal, and that's not going to happen. It's not realistic because our students do not have the same talents and abilities. But what we should be doing is, as an educator, we need to teach them to the best of our ability. Our job is to teach them academics. If their parents want to teach them that it's okay to live this lifestyle or to be a racist, which I don't agree with, that's not my job as an educator. My job is to make sure that every child that walks out of my classroom knows how to read, knows how to write, knows how to express themselves in an intelligent way, that no matter what their opinion is, whether it's I agree with it or not, that they can express their opinion and feel safe about it. To know that in my classroom, when my kids come into my classroom, I challenge their thought process. Not because I'm trying to set an ideology into them, but because I want to challenge them so that when they go out in the real world and they meet people who do not agree with them, how do you communicate with someone? Give you a story. Week and a half ago, I show up, bought something off Facebook, found out it was another teacher in the district. We just kind of started talking. You know what? We don't agree on anything. But we sat there for 30 minutes and we had a respectful conversation. What we are doing to our students is pitting them against each other. We're pitting black kids and white kids against each other, and they don't even know why. They don't. We are pitting teachers against parents. It is not my job as a teacher to guide the moral values of a family, whether I agree with them or not. My job is to demonstrate character, honesty, respect of all other people. And I think that we have gotten off the path. All of these people here, whether I agree with them or not, guess what? They have that opinion because we are all Americans. And I don't agree with some of these, but we are Americans, and our job is to respect each other.
Our next speaker is Cynthia Shoto, and then Faith Hodges.
Good evening. My name is Cynthia Shoto, and exactly 200 years ago in 1821, Kansas City began with its first trading post right on the Missouri River by Francois Shoto, who had just founded St. Louis with his family. They were very close with the Osage. They married with them, they worked with them, they protected the Osage from their enemies. And up north on Shoto Parkway, we just had a groundbreaking ceremony for a new exhibit that shows Shoto standing side by side his Native American brothers. I can only imagine how shocked he would be if he could see 200 years later that all he did to bring unity and peace to this area with those who had a different skin color, and all the progress that mankind has made over the years in caring for their neighbors, that his direct descendant, my son, will be asked questions in his school on how racist he is because he's white, and told that he is an oppressor to his best friends who happen to be Kenyan, African American, Uzbekistanian, and Mexican. Those are his best friends. And these friends really love each other. They're there for each other, and now you think it's your role to re-educate them, to learn that one is the enemy? How can this help our youth? Why are you teaching them to view everything and everyone through race glasses? One is supposed to be shamed for something they can't help with how white their skin is, and the other is told that they'll never amount to as much because the white people like my son oppress them. And I'm assuming that how woke they are to their white privilege could even affect their grades and their treatment in their schools. This theory is racist, and it's a tool to tear down American institutions like capitalism, religious freedom, free speech, the nuclear family, and more. Ask the Chinese who have been through Mao's Cultural Revolution in China, and they'll tell you this is the exact same verbiage they were told, except theirs was how much money you make. That's what divided them, not the skin color. But it's the same thing. This is nothing new. It's refurbished Marxism, and we cannot tolerate it in our schools. A house divided against itself cannot stand, whether it's our nation with races being turned on each other, or even the family where kids are hiding things from their parents with the help of the schools. I know firsthand teachers are encouraging students that want to transition genders how to, without one conversation with their parents. I know several friends in my neighborhood who have been told how to move out on their own because their parents are conservative and they're liberals and they just can't mesh with them anymore. I know you care about our kids, and I'm thankful that you guys do what you do, but no one knows or loves my children more than me. And to feel like I can't trust things that are going on in the school because I don't know what you're telling them to come against our parenting is just really scary. So I thank you for listening tonight. Thank you.
Our Our next speaker is Faith Hodges, and then Stephen Strickland would be next.
Faith Hodges. There is a story of a Christian German man who lived during the Nazi era. He was attending church with other fellow Germans, and there was a train track that ran behind their small church, and every Sunday morning they would hear the train go by, and they would hear the cries of the Jews being transported to concentration camps. Everyone in the church was very disturbed by the sounds that came out of the train passing by week after week. So as they continued to have church each Sunday, they decided to just sing their hymns louder to drown out the cries of the Jews, so they wouldn't have to endure the cries of desperation and helplessness. Many years later, this man is quoted saying, "Years have passed and no one talks about it much anymore, but I still hear the train whistle in my sleep. I can still hear them crying out for help. God forgive all of us who called ourselves Christians, yet did nothing to intervene. God forgive you as Americans, for you have blocked out the screams of millions of your own children. The response is the same as it was in my country: silence." I say all of that to call out most of you on this board and the parents who are not standing up against critical race theory and the brainwashing of our children. I know many of you, if not all of you, on this board attend church, and how dare you call yourself a Christian and not stand up for what you know to be truth. I, for one, will not drown out the sounds of the innocent children in our schools and be a bystander who will not do everything in their power to stop this evil. I will not look back on my life and say I should have done something, because I believe in protecting our children no matter the cost, and you should too. Just because you may repackage CRT to put a cuter sounding name on it does not make it any less evil. You will not fool us, and we will not stand down. Do not think for 1 second that any of you on this board are indispensable, because you are sorely mistaken. We will continue to fight for our kids and will replace you in an instant. And I don't care if I have to run for this position myself. I will do whatever it takes to keep this school district from corrupting our kids and shoving agenda down their throats. I raised my kids to love everyone because God created everyone equal, no matter what they look like. My kids see character. They do not see skin color. They have never come home from school saying someone was horrible because they were different color than them. They come home saying someone mistreated someone else or was bullying someone else, and that is based off character. So maybe we should be discussing how to teach our children to be better and more kind human beings to each other as a whole. Let's teach children to be kind to everyone, and that it is never okay to treat someone with anything but respect. Now, there is a topic that should be brought back up in schools again: respect. But you don't seem to care about teaching good morals. That would be too extreme. So let's just focus on teaching our kids to hate each other instead. Sounds reasonable, right? Absolutely not. And I am tired of pouring our hearts out to you guys for you to just convene together as a board and do the exact opposite, like you're on some sort of power trip. Well, your days are numbered on this board, so enjoy it while you can, because I, along with many other parents, are not afraid of you or fighting for our kids.
The next speaker is Stephen Strickland, and then Melissa Baldwin.
My name is Stephen Strickland. I just wanted to talk to you about a mandatory class in high school in Lee Summit called Modern Global Issues. And I'm concerned about this class for a few reasons. It's one that's required and mandatory for someone to take before they can graduate from high school in Lee Summit. My son took this class this last semester. And I really have three hopeful outcomes when I want to talk to you about this course. One is that this course would not be made mandatory. It's one thing if you want to teach this course. It's another thing to make it mandatory to graduate from high school in Lee Summit by taking this course. Another outcome would be that this course would just simply be banned. A third one would be that it could be changed. I think the curriculum needs to be looked at. This course, even by the name of the course, you can tell that there are progressive liberal teachers that would love to take this class in a direction that fits their ideology. The assignments and the lectures from this class were completely un-American, anti-capitalist, pro-communist, pro-CRT, and one-sided liberal ideology. I'm going to give you a couple examples of actual assignments that my son was required to fill out in order to graduate from high school in Lee Summit. The first section of the course is called The State of Black America. There was an assignment where he was told to imagine himself as a white racist and then answer the following questions. My son had a serious problem with imagining himself as a white racist. It's hard to do when you are not, but he was required to do this. I had to tell my son over and over, listen, you have to just do the assignment, just get through this course, because you will not graduate from this high school unless you do these assignments. That was one of them. And again, I think a lot of people in this room would say that there's a real advantage to Black History Month to look at the achievements of Black Americans in history. No one is against that. But critical race theory, where you teach that you are inherently racist because you're white, is not something that I think ought to be a requirement to graduate from Lee Summit High School. Another example of just anti-American, assignments was this one: make a list of things that the United States has done to Iran that would harm relations between our two nations. What are the aggressive acts by the U.S. against them from 1979 to today? That's another one. A third one was about the 2016 election. Nothing about the 2020 election, but the 2016 election was full of conjecture. There was a statement that said Putin hated Hillary Clinton. The FBI investigated. They found nothing. There was just a lot of things like this that my son was forced to have to listen to. And my point to the teacher, and I talked to the teacher, was, he acted like it was a two-sided thing. He said he taught in the classroom both sides, but the assignments that the students had to do were always one-sided. And I feel like we're raising citizens that are going to live in Lee Summit that feel bad for the color of their skin, that are un-American, unpatriotic. The graduation I went to was probably the most humanistic thing I've ever seen. I was glad we started tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance. There was not that at the Lee Summit North High School graduation. There was not the Star Spangled Banner, and I think we got to be concerned about the citizens we're raising.
Our next speaker is Melissa Baldwin and then Micah Weeman.
My name is Melissa Baldwin. You might remember that I spoke at the last board meeting. Well, here I am again, along with several other parents, grandparents, and taxpayers. We are here to make our voices heard because we want to see change in our schools. We are sick and tired of the decisions our Board of Education is making and the lack of accountability because of them. We will not get quiet until things dramatically change in this school district and every Missouri school. At last month's meeting, even after several parents stood up and spoke against CRT being taught in our schools, you still voted yes on a training for teachers in which the authors and presenters share CRT ideas and beliefs. The next day, I followed up with you all by email with my dissatisfaction with CRT being taught, as well as other points I spoke on. I received only one board member's response, which stated that CRT has a negative tone and that what the board voted yes on is not CRT. Well, that board member was right about CRT being negative, but what you all voted yes on is most definitely CRT. It is being covered up by words including but not limited to social emotional learning, diversity, equity, and inclusion, culturally responsive teaching, multiculturalism, and the list goes on. It's not being called CRT anymore because the authors, creators, and presenters of these trainings have to make their money somehow. They were no longer building their divisive movement by calling it CRT. You continue to spend thousands of taxpayer dollars on training teachers how to segregate our kids, labeling some as oppressors and others as the oppressed. You make decisions that are not bringing our community together, but further dividing it. Your decisions are causing division and hate in our community, schools, and our own homes, my home. My older kids show hate for America, and I can tell you that they did not learn that from my husband or I. They also lack respect for our American flag and what it stands for, and that was not taught in our home either. They show disrespect toward the police, and I most definitely can say that they did not learn that from my husband or myself. Our family has a former police officer in it, and we know other police families. When a police officer dies in the line of duty, we take that seriously and we show respect by flying the blue line flag. My own daughter called me a racist for flying that flag. That is not right. All of this causes arguments and problems in our home, and that is where I draw the line. Division and segregation have never have a place, and politics should only be taught in political science classes. However, you keep using our kids as political pawns. What happened to encouraging students to use their talents and abilities to be whatever they want to be? Quit pushing your political agendas on our children and further causing division. I implore you to begin listening to us parents because we're not going to stop. In fact, we're just getting started. Our group has come together and is taking these concerns to our state reps, senators, and Governor Parson. We will not stop until CRT and the hatred it stands for is banned in our schools. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Micah Weeman and then Tim Smith.
Hello, my name is Micah Weeman, and I would like to discuss the continued evidence of CRT in our district. I have heard from several sources that board members and administration are denying that CRT is actually being taught. I'd like to read this email sent out to teachers in our district from the Lee Summit North Counseling Department. The Lee Summit North Counseling Department would like to offer an additional opportunity to participate in professional development related to race and becoming an anti-racist educator. This PD will run 5 weeks and will follow the same format as our fall group PD, using Dr. Dina Simmons' article, How to Be an Anti-Racist Educator. We will discuss the following topics: self-awareness, acknowledging racism and white supremacy, studying and teaching representative history, talking about race with students, and when you see racism, do something. This is just one of many examples that prove CRT is very much in our district. Dina Simmons is a supporter of Ibram X. Kendi and gleaned much of her work from him. I'll give you an example of their beliefs. The only remedy to racist discrimination is anti-racist discrimination. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. Let me read that again. The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. I'll give you a direct and personal example of this being played out with my son, who was an 8th grader at Bernard Campbell. Every week, the topic of racism was infused into nearly every class except for passably mathematics. Multiple surveys and class discussions were given that made him feel inferior and wrongfully shamed. He has had black friends since kindergarten that he is now afraid to talk to because he has been told he has white privilege, that he is an oppressor, and that he will say something to offend his friends that he doesn't even know is offensive. This is CRT in real time having devastating effects on our children and their relationships. This is divisive and is absolutely unacceptable. Do you see a pattern here? The only remedy to past discrimination is present discrimination. This is what we want for America's future. In one of the slides used in one of the trainings at Dina Simmons' keynote address at school in Illinois, she used a diagram with examples of white supremacy. According to the slide, overt white supremacy includes using the N-word and hate crimes. Examples of covert white supremacy include the slogan, "Make America Great Again," believing that we're just one human family, and colorblindness. Yes, if you love America and want it to be great, if you believe there is only one race, the human race, and you choose to not judge people based on the color of your skin, you're a racist, according to her. I have actually emailed every single board member multiple times over this past year. I have not received a single response from one of you, not one. I'm not sure how many of you can claim to understand the needs of your constituents if you refuse to listen to our concerns. I will speak for many parents by saying we feel helpless, frustrated, and angry about what is being taught to our children. Our tax dollars are being used to indoctrinate our teachers and in turn students with these very dangerous lies. America and our future is at stake. Thank you. I'm looking forward to some responses from the board.
Next speaker is Tim Smith. Is he here? The final speaker is Rebecca Lindquist. Is Rebecca here? Okay. That will conclude our public comments for tonight. And we will be moving on here to item 5.01, which is our board reports or meetings attended over the last month. And kind of like we did last month to my fellow board members, we'll give just a second here as I apologize. No, sorry. Okay, so 5.01 is our board reports or meetings attended. I believe last month we started on the left, so we will start on the right today. And so we'll start with board member Sparks.
So just a few things. I do want to acknowledge the passing of Kagan McDaniel, Lee Summit West 2021 graduate, and his mother. So our prayers and thoughts are with I know Nikki. I know with watching the services, his favorite scripture was Philippians 4:13, and that is my favorite scripture. And so that will stick to me, and it's just a reminder that we have to show compassion towards one another. Also, I was fortunate of being able to attend our board retreat, and that was a great time to being able to collaborate with other board members and also the leadership team. And so thank you for all of the presentations and then also the facilitation that took place during those days. I also was able to complete all of my online training, gearing up, that's right, gearing up for our MSBA training. And so I am looking forward to spending the next couple days with my fellow board members with that. And then last but not least, I am looking forward to also being active in the committees and being able to continue to do the work.
Thank you very much for that. Board Member Fritchie.
Thank you very much, President Murdoch. I'd like to thank Board Member Sparks for mentioning this service for Keegan McDaniel. I attended the service yesterday, and it was very emotional, of course. What a loss for our kids and our community. Personally, helped hire his mom at Pleasantly Middle School, and he used to come to school with her when she got her room ready in the summer. And so I've known that guy since he was a little guy, so that was tough. Next, I'd like to talk about Lee Summit Educational Foundation. We've got lots of things going on. The foundation recently hosted 2 get-to-know the foundation receptions to connect with potential volunteers and committee members this past month. Also, the foundation board of directors approved a $310,000 annual campaign budget for next year to support district initiatives. And included in those district initiatives that they have agreed to support are $99,000 for the Diploma Plus Real World Learning elementary science kits, $148,000 for technology support and PEAK grants, and $63,000 for need-based student support, which includes our Helping Hands Fund and the Project Success tutoring. So happy to allocate that for our students in our district. Finally, on the foundation front, I would like to just remind everyone that the foundation will be hosting a retirement reception at Great Beginnings tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. to thank our foundation's executive director, Cheryl Frankie, for 30 years of service to our school district, which has included the foundation, starting the foundation 28 years ago through the district's strategic planning efforts. And she has been the only director of the foundation since its creation. And and she will be dearly missed. And I'm sure you'll hear more about that if you'll attend her reception tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Also, just in the past month, of course, we had the boundary team meetings, and I attended both nights of that because I was really curious to see what everybody was thinking about all of our boundary options. So that was great. Also, I have attended a couple of Chamber of Commerce events in the past month, including the ribbon cutting at Sabor Latino Restaurant, which was very good, in downtown Lee Summit, and then also went to the Chamber Gala this past Saturday evening, which was also a great event for them. So it was wonderful to attend. Thanks to the Chamber for those events. That's all.
Thank you, Board Member Fritchie. Board Member Hedrick.
I'm sure I just have a couple of things. And some of you other board members were in attendance also at the Cooperating School District of Greater Kansas City virtual annual meeting that was conducted on June the 2nd. And the legislative update from the lobbyist for that organization and I thought provided some really good details, and then also some information about how things really work, or maybe not work, in Jefferson City. So I appreciated that, and always appreciate the work that he does on behalf of all the school districts in that cooperative. Also, in terms of the board retreat, I appreciate everybody's work on that. I thought it was a good 2 days, long 2 days, but good information, both in regard to our book study and then also just to some of the operational information that we received. And then yesterday, we had our finance meeting that Board Member Campbell will report on here in a couple of minutes.
Thank you very much. Board Member Allen?
Thank you. Thank you, sir. I think it was me that wasn't speaking loudly enough, so I get really close. I don't know how that is, but I'll just go in sort of chronological order here. May 21, May 21st was chamber luncheon, so that was nice to be able to get back to sort of our typical no masks luncheon, some announcements, good discussion around, of all things, the new baseball team, right? The Monarchs, sort of new refreshed baseball team. But we all of us attended the high school graduations, Children's Mercy Park on the 22nd, and then a number of us went to the Summit Ridge Academy graduation on the 24th, and Summit Ridge led by Andy Campbell. So 120 kids in that program graduate this year, and a phenomenal success. And talk about belonging and inclusion. That academy and that high school is fantastic. So that was another tremendous experience this year. At Government Relations Committee, and it was really the wrap-up from a national report from Senator Graves' office, and then Senator Sirpoy and Representative Engel were also at the meeting, and they reported out the state work that was completed this year and some of the things that we're targeting for special sessions coming up. City Council members Bob Johnson and Fred DeMauro were also there. Very good, again, open dialogue. We may not always agree, but have some good, strong discourse and good, really mutual respect for all involved. Our board retreat was outstanding. This book was well read, studied. I made the comment to Roderick earlier that said I was going to mention the fact that even 3 months in, he had some very good comments, good conversation, and holding us accountable as sort of the neophyte, right? The new kid in town, asking some good, deep questions of us and administration. And I think that was about it. Yeah, indeed. And then, the service for Mr. McDaniel, I'm not able to attend, but see some of it certainly reported, and just deep felt sadness for that situation. So, thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Allen. Board Member Campbell?
I have some committee updates, but I just wanted to say sometimes as a board member, this work is easy and fun, and sometimes as a board member, this work is hard and challenging. And so some of these committee updates are around the fun and easy, like celebrating the graduations of our 3 high schools at Children's Mercy Park, celebrating the graduations at Summit Ridge Academy. That was an amazing day and night and night. So just want to say it's hard and easy, but it's always an honor to serve here for our students and with our students, and so that was an exciting activity. I've spent several meetings with the insurance RFP team and the insurance committee team, and I just want to say thank you to Sarah McMillan, thank you to Dr. Miller, and thank you to all the participants on that RFP team. That was hard work to really evaluate, I call it the balance of, as a district, what our tax dollar money that we spend for the benefits for our staff, balanced with what are the very best benefits that I consider part of what people earn that we provide to our staff. That struggle or that balance is very hard. And so with the contribution of that RFP team and our partners around that, I think we did really great work, and I just want to say thank you around that. Again, highlighting the insurance committee. That has building representation from every building on that committee, and they all participated in that discussion throughout the updates that Sarah and her team and Dr. Miller provided, and gave feedback, and in this last meeting heard some of the plan design information and we're in agreement, and then we'll have follow-up meetings in the fall to really hear how those building representatives on the insurance committee are sharing that information out and gathering feedback from their entire building. So that committee is such a strength, I think, for us as we make decisions to really leverage that feedback loop that Sarah and Dr. Miller have put in place. So just want to say thank you around all of that and continue to be excited to be a part of that committee. Like Dr. Hedrick, Board Member Hedrick, I participated in the Greater Kansas City Collaborative and really appreciated that information, continued to learn a great deal. I attended one of the evenings of the Boundary team, and again, just thank you to that committee and to the committee leadership with Dr. Miller, because just a great job and a great evening to really hear their thought processes shared with people coming in, you know, across the community to ask questions and gather additional information. So thank you for providing those evenings. I know we'll be looking forward to more evenings like that in the fall as well, and so I'm excited about that also. Really loved the board retreat, and thank you to all my fellow board members. Thank you to the administration, because I continued to learn a lot from my fellow board members and appreciate the engagement from all of us as a board. So thank you for that as well. Yesterday attended that insurance committee meeting, but also attended with Dr. Hedrick on the finance committee. And so we'll have more updates around that as the next item.
Thank you, Board Member Campbell. Vice President Marshall.
Thank you, President Murdoch. Well, I'll pick it up where Kathy kind of left it. The board retreat was great. So thank you to all the administration who participated and supported, whether you were there or not. I know everyone had a hand in putting it together. And of course, to my fellow board members and Dr. Buck, I think we had a really enlightening time on Thursday and as well as Friday with the heavy hitting administrative stuff. And also wanted to thank Ms. Shelley Sanders, who hasn't officially joined the team yet, but was there and able to facilitate. So looking forward to great things coming from her in her new position. This past month, I did my orientation with Lee Summit Cares as one of their non-voting board members, which was very, very enlightening as well, because they have a new executive director, Elaine Perilla, which we all met during the board retreat. And they were able to explain in great, great detail. They love to explain Lee Summit Cares, so I was there for probably almost, I had to leave and come back. So, but it was very enlightening. So for those in our community who don't know, Lee Summit Cares is an organization that mobilizes community members, and their mission is to develop a culture of physical and mental wellness for the youth in Lee Summit and the families that inspire positive and healthy choices. So that is what they are all about. They have a youth advisory board, which is comprised of LSR7 high school students. There's an application process for those students who want to be on that board, but anyone can participate and volunteer. The few meetings that we have had, and I've attended several meetings in the months prior before actually being on the committee, Lee Summit Cares, in partnership with Rediscover, is really leaning in heavy to their youth mental health task force, and LSR7 is one of the partners on that. So we spent quite a lot of time leaning into that subject. So I look forward to LSR7 continuing the partnership with Lee Summit Cares and leaning into youth mental health, because I know we've seen this past year a lot of things were greatly exposed that were already there, and some things have already created. So it would be great to make sure that we have adequate resources and services for our youth to take advantage of. So if you want to know more about Lee Summit Cares and get involved, their website is lscares.org. They also have this, it's called Unplug and Explore. It's like a little bingo card, they call it, where you unplug, meaning, you disconnect from digital stuff. And it has activities all around the community to go and participate in, and you get kind of like a stamp on it. And then once you complete it, you can turn the card in to City Hall or Parks and Rec, and you get a prize. So these are located at any Parks and Rec center. There's a stack of them out there on the desk, or reach out to Lee Summit Cares and they'll make sure you get one so you can do something fun other than being behind a screen.
Thank you for that update. My update's very quick. Obviously, the board retreat was great. It was nice to see digital Dr. Whaley as a part of the presentation. I did keep expecting to see your hand. I come up from behind the TV or something like that. So I just had to make that quick note. We also had our monthly board leadership meeting, which Dr. Buck was kind enough to send me a text and say, "Are you en route?" To which I responded, "I have no idea what you're talking about." And so we were able to do that then via the phone, which was nice. So I do appreciate the flexibility on that. And that's my bad on that one with the old calendar scheduling. But the last thing I did want to just mention to anybody who might be watching, especially online, since the majority of people left in the room are staff, that many of the things that are on our consent agenda tonight and even items for decision that we are making as a board tonight were discussed extensively within the work session last week as a part of the board retreat. And I think that becomes important. So, because there are some big topics obviously on the agenda tonight, but I do think it's important that the public understand that we had lengthy discussion on many of these items last Thursday and Friday as a part of the board retreat and work session. I just felt like we needed to mention that. We are going to move on to item 6, which is our finance report, and it sounded like it is Board Member Campbell this month, so I will turn it over to you.
It is. Thank you, Board President Murdoch. I attended the Finance Committee meeting, and we discussed the contracts that were $15,000 and less. We reviewed those. We reviewed the pre-ACT and the ACT vouchers, and so we'll be reviewing and approving that this evening as well. That provides the district access to an ACT test for each student before graduation. And so these vouchers will include the 2022 as well as 2023. And there's actually a piece of that as well. So there's the ACT vouchers. The pre-ACT is given to 10th graders, and then Lee Summit North is piloting a pre-ACT that will be for 9th graders. And so this includes all of that. And I think the real benefit around that is, years back, the ACT was something that parents had to provide the funding for, and only certain students were engaged and able to take that ACT. With this district move to provide this voucher, that really says to all of our students, let's get this ACT as part of your education, and let's see where you land with these scores. And so to me, that's an exciting thing to be able to talk about and approve. The Desmos Math is another item, and that's a digital math book that is used in the middle schools. 2 of the middle schools chose to do this as a digital math book. 1 middle school is continuing to choose to do that as a workbook, and so that will be approved this evening as well. The Apple Computer Lab replacements. So the technology department manages these replacements, but it is a replacement that's used in the middle school production labs and high school publishing and production labs. So as we talk about the technology that our students use, I think many parents are very familiar with the Chromebooks, but then we do have these additional technologies and the importance of those use in both these middle school programs and the high school programs, and really give them that technology that they need. So we'll be looking at that approval as well. This is a replacement of the devices, and that's on a 5-year life cycle. So every 5 years, that'll come up for renewal replacement. This is one of the big items and very exciting. So throughout our district, and from a life cycle management standpoint around what computers our teachers and many staff use, there have been many different technologies, and that can create a lot of support issues, that can create different teachers having different types of technology that they're trying to use in the classroom. And so as part of the review during the CFMP process, the technology department was challenged to go out and gather information from our teachers, from the administration that utilize technology, and really find out what would be best in the classroom for them to use, and to get everyone on one common platform. And that helps in many ways. That means that our students get that experience from that teacher with the common computer that they're all using across the organization. That helps our district from a support standpoint in being able to best support those teachers in their technology that they're using. And so as part of that, they gathered a committee of over 70, and Dr. Whaley, correct me if I don't have that number correct, but over 70 teachers participated in that evaluation process. Great. And they looked at different options that could be selected from. They gave feedback. They had some in the classroom to test drive them, and they decided and shared that back with the technology team that the Microsoft Surface Book 3 would be that chosen technology. And then through negotiations and hard work, the technology team is bringing forth for that for us to review. And thankfully, as was pointed out, I think by board member Murdoch, board president Murdoch, our board vice president Megan, I think definitely the demo that we got in the board work session was so awesome to be able to see how a teacher could disconnect this, carry the tablet portion around the classroom, interact better with the students. That was some of the comments. I feel like I've been tethered to the front of the room with my laptop, and now they get to walk around. There's a stylus that will be included that is being funded by our educational foundation. There's the keyboard, the mouse, everything, a dual monitor that the teachers will have then in their classroom. And so this is a very exciting change. It does come with expense, and that's what we'll be looking at approving, and it is a lease agreement, so that'll be part of that as well. I think the details we reviewed in the board work session also. The next item, again, equally as exciting, is the smart interactive panel that will be used in getting that common technology across all of our classrooms, getting that common technology in a lot of our new construction areas, and having those teachers be able to really leverage this amazing piece of equipment that will let our students interact with the board, that will let our teachers interact with the board, that will let our students and teachers come to the board and draw and write. I was amazed. I was amazed when we did some of the school visits and saw some of these demos that were in the classrooms, and the demo that were provided by Kyle Pace. Thank you for that, because that demo was really awesome and showed the interactiveness of these boards. It just enhances the learning of every single student across our district. So again, lease agreement, and so that will be part of our approval as well. Another item is the music agreement, which is insurance for our district. And so that went through the RFP process. That was the recommendation. And so we'll be approving that continued agreement as well. Another item that very excited to talk about, the letter of intent to purchase land. So and I know Dr. Buck, you've shared that tomorrow an announcement will be coming out and a video will be coming out, and this is just that first step of that letter of intent that we'll be approving, and that will look at Paradise Park, intended to be as a mixed-use facility to accommodate our early education programs. And we know, as part of the bond project, our community approved and shared with us the importance of our Great Beginnings and our early learners and the additional needs to eliminate the wait list and have more availability for all of our early learners. So that's exciting as well. We discussed the bond report, and we'll talk a little bit more about some items that will be coming up for your review and approval. One of those has to do with an Evergy. So with additional public electric service that is required around the athletic project improvements at Lee Summit West, that is an easement conveyance with the utility Evergy. The construction change order, so Monarch construction change order, has to do again with the athletic, but it does include several items, including fire alarm panels and accessories, associated electricity, electrical for that. Also, those fire alarms are for the elevators at all 3 high schools. So modifications to the structural system at Lee Summit West, new audio visual broadcasting systems, design team coordination issues, and unforeseen these were due to some unforeseen conditions. So that will be a change order, but that change order will come out of the contingency budget for the athletic portion of project on the overall bond project. So there are contingency dollars to cover that. The middle school renovations, and this is not middle school 4, these are the middle school renovations for the other 3 middle schools. And we talked a lot during the finance meeting about the changes in what construction is costing, what lumber costs are, and so this largely amends the guaranteed maximum price around that. And when we looked at those modifications, so if everyone remembers within the middle school renovations, that includes that transition for our 6th grade students to go to the middle school. That includes the additional space for classrooms, art, and music. In addition, each school will receive those security entry improvements, and that will allow them to meet current standards. And it provides additional flexible learning environments in those schools and other renovations that are included in that area. Now, with that, though, the change will be that will require about $2.6 million over what was initially budgeted for that project. What is great is that Dr. Miller and Kyle Gorell have been providing us with that monthly update to the bond project separated out by project. So even though this project is coming in, the estimates, the guaranteed price maximum at $2.6 million over, there will be $1 million from contingency and the tech hardware line item of the middle school renovations project. And then because middle school number 4 is under budget, we'll pull $1.6 million from that construction line item budget over to the middle school renovations. So because we've had that monthly update, it's so easy to see where those dollars are coming from and why we will allocate those dollars to this project to be able to continue and work on this project. So any questions on that? Okay. Then we also talked about the transfer of funds. And so we'll be doing that approval in just a minute. We talked about the investments through May. We reviewed the revenue and expense report. The current fund balance for May is 38.4%. We're going to talk about an amendment to the budget, and then we'll also do a review and approval of the preliminary budget for 2021-2022. So with that, I move that we approve the transfer of $4,072,109.11 from the general fund to the special revenue fund.
Motion and a second for item 6.02. Is there any discussion on this particular motion? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
I move that the Board of Education approve the treasurer's report and the payment of the bills.
Motion and a second for 6.03 to accept the treasurer's report and payment of the bills. Any discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
So on the amendment to the budget, do we want to have, Steve, do you want to come up and review that?
All right. Good evening. Let's talk about some exciting budget information. And in reference to tonight, we're first of all to be in two parts with this presentation. First part is about the amending of the 2021 budget, and the second part will be about the 21-22 preliminary budget. So we'll review those both tonight in this slide presentation. First, the slides have several portions to it, and there's a lot of small numbers involved in it. So what I'll do is try to cover that in highlights and go to the main areas. And since we covered this pretty much in detail during our work session, most of the details have probably been covered pretty well. In reference to the amended budget, the 21-22 amended budget is only needed for the debt service fund. And when we sold the bonds back in September, we also did bond refunding to take advantage of lower interest rates of our existing bonds. So that happened back then. We received additional revenues from this in the debt service fund by about $4.7 million. And this also received more tax revenues during this year than we anticipated originally from the preliminary budget, for a total of about $5.8 million going into the debt service fund at this time. Then the bond debt fund also increased spending about $10 million due to this restructuring of the refunding of these bonds. And the preliminary budget projected, as a result of the bond refunding and changing the bond debt service principal and interest schedule, that's why we're doing the bond amendments at this time. It revised our payment schedule and paid off outstanding principal of a Series 2012B bond, and along with some other cost issuances and accrued interest and the new 2020 bonds, that increased our bond payments during this year, more than what was anticipated because of these refundings all going into the bond debt service. So that's the reason we're doing the debt service amendment tonight. So in reference to our little slide presentation for the 2021 budget amendment, it's legally required for all expenses only, and actually expenses cannot exceed the budget expenditure, so that's why we're doing this. The expenses in this plan are projected through June 30th of this year, and the revenues are also projected through the end of June of this year. The fund balances are unaudited at this time because we have to finish the year end, 6/30, and then we'll get your audit next fall. Okay? Then, lots of small numbers. I promised that for you, so here they are. Real quickly, this is basically involving the revenues. It shows the beginning 2021 preliminary amounts at the top part. In the middle part, it shows the new revenues that are projected for the end of this year, followed by the variances in the portion down at the bottom from what was last year, June 20, to now June 2021. Then at the very bottom, it shows the percentiles differences of these revenues. What we really want to focus on is the debt service fund. You'll notice we just talked about that. It shows about $5.8 million more than what was anticipated in the original budget. Again, that's why we're doing the amendment. All the other ones are under the original amounts. Or, I'm sorry, they were more than the original amounts, but that's a good thing. Concerning expenditures, same kind of situation. Real quickly, again, this shows the original budget at the beginning of the top part there. It shows the new projected amounts in the middle, followed by the differences. Let's focus on those, basically. You'll notice that all of them in all the funds are less than was originally projected in the preliminary budget, so we don't need to amend those. Focus on the one that says the debt service fund. That shows that we're $10 million over than the original. So we originally budgeted for $17.7 million. We actually spent $27.7 due to the refunding and all those things I just talked about previously. So that's why this is needed to be amended for those reasons. That's the expenditure side. Then how it turns into fund balance history. We're always interested in that. That shows the history from going forward in the blue, followed by the projection for the year end of 28.65%. And what that is, shows the percentage of cash balance compared to the total budget. So we want to keep track of that. And the board has directed that this should not go below 20%. As you can well see, that's well above that at this time. So we're doing very well. Are there any questions in reference to the amendment slides at this time? All good? All right. Do you want to do your motion to approve those amendments before we go on further?
I think that would be good. Yes.
I move to amend the 2020-2021 debt service fund from $17,723,876 to $27,746,000.
Snappy second. All right, we have a motion and a second here for the amendment to the budget. Is there any discussion on this amendment? Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Perfect. Thank you.
Back on the stage.
All right, let's do it.
There you go.
All right, let's talk about the 21-22 preliminary budget going forward for next year. And we start off with enrollment. Student numbers are estimated at this time. This enrollment projection comes from the fall 2020 demographic report. So directly off of that, so it should be as accurate as we're going to get based on the number of kids we should get for now and the future going forward. I'd call your attention to the 2021 amounts of number of kids. We decreased about 399 kids from the previous year this year. We all kind of know that had a bad year due to the COVID situation. Now, it projects in this scenario increasing back to 407. So we're supposed to get those kids all back in the fall, hopefully. Then going forward, it has a slight increase each year going forward, about 100 kids normally in most years. Bottom line, the total enrollment growth projected is 0.41% per year. That will be an additional 731 students by fiscal year 27. So with continued growth, looks good. Any questions on the enrollment? All right, let's talk about some revenues. Revenues in this budget are based on local and county. The assessed valuation is projected to increase by 5.38%. That's a good thing. You want to keep doing that. It also has local and county revenues projected based on historical trends. The state revenues are based on the formula of $6,375 per ADA. That's the average daily attendance. And it's also based on state revenues projected on other known factors that are normal for this situation. Federal revenues. Most of the federal revenues go to the special ed and title programs for those major projects, major funds. And also, this is a little unique. We just had this last year a little bit too, but we're going to carry it forward. The COVID-related federal fund stimulus monies, those are all coming in. In this budget, we're projecting $12.4 million of stimulus money coming into this next fiscal year. Okay, Easter monies. And then we also will still have about $2.4 million after this budget year. Okay, so we still have some yet to claim after this happens. Total estimated revenues in this budget is $276.7 million. That's for all funds. And you can see at the very bottom there is a nice little pie chart showing how all kind of divides up. And you can see the majority is local by about 60%. Any questions on revenues? All righty. And in reference to the 21-22 expenditures, salaries is a big part, as you know. We have $4.1 million for one-step salary increase included in this year's budget. That's a normal expenditure. You can see the percentages of what the average was for the teachers and support staff and professionals and so forth. It also includes additional staff. There's some adjustments being made through all that. It averages about $708,000 as a net increase in additional staff for next year in this budget. There's additional recovery sources. That is almost $1.2 million. That is for the COVID-related student achievement gap recovery. That's required under the ESER3 program. So part of this budget, and you're going to see this later on in the agenda also, is the ESER3 monies that pertain to this topic specifically. But that's built in this budget also. Then we also have in this budget the phase 1 of the salary step plan. So this is the first step. Then we have another step coming on in future years potentially for that. That in phase 1 is costing about $2.74 million in this budget. Okay, so that's an increase. It also includes the potential for health insurance contribution by the district of $250,000. Based on the information we just received the last couple of days, we may not need that based on what I'm hearing. So that's probably a little extra that we can use elsewhere or not use and keep it in the cash. That'd be great too. It also includes the retirement contributions by the district. That's on a normal basis, and that takes care of our expenditures for the increases of this budget. Any questions on the expense plan? Great. Then it all turns into a nice little pie chart and shows this is the total budget of all funds. So that includes the bond projects and capital projects and the whole shebang. The salary and benefits percentage is 50.21%. If you take that out and just look at the operating budget, the salaries would be 85.1% of our operating money. That's normal, okay? So this is not exactly what we'd be talking about when we talk about operating money only, okay? All right, any questions on the pie chart? Super. All right, let's get into this rascal. This is what we're really requesting for your approval tonight. It's for the 21-22 preliminary budget. It has everything crunched into one nice little form, and you really start off with the ending balances we project for the end of this year, turn into the beginning balances for next year. You can see across the top, the general fund incidental projects to be about $65 million by the time we have June 30th. Teacher fund should be 0, that's normal. Capital projects, $6.6 million. Debt service plan should have about 41.3. Restricted fund is going to be about 700,000 negative according to this projection. As you all know, we've had the COVID situation with the restricted funds are basically the nutrition, the before and after schools program, and the activities accounts. Those have all hit real hard because we didn't have kids in session to see the monies. The expenditures all maintained actually, so that gave us a negative balance. Bond construction fund projects to be $164.2 million, and total of all funds beginning balance should be around $276.5 million to start the year. Then below that shows the revenues we kind of talked about in the previous slides. It shows the expenditures and increases we talked about in the previous slides. Followed at the very bottom gets to the ending balances or what's projected when you do those all together. Note that the ending balance for the operating money projects to be about $75 million next year at this time. That's an increase of about $10 million. That's a good thing. Also remember in this budget is the $12.4 million of ESSER money included in this package also, okay? Then you come across the bottom, you can see all the funds individually, and in the very right-hand bottom corner, you'll notice that it says we have about $2.45 billion in assessed valuation. That's an estimate. That is $135.1 million increase from last year and about 5.8%. It's a good thing to have assessed valuation increase. It helps your taxes and does a good thing. It also projects that this to have a 5.3033 mill rate, and that is a decrease of 0.1672, and that's a decrease of 3.05% in your mills. That's a good thing too. Any questions on that form? This is what you basically be approving tonight. Then what turns into next is, again, we want to end up with what our fund balance history is and going forward as a percentile of the budget, the cash percentile of the budget, and it projects an increase going to 31.54%, and that again is mainly due to the ESSER federal stimulus monies coming into this package. All right, any questions on this? All right, if not, then we just are ready for your decision.
We were trying really hard to honor your request from last week.
Okay,
right?
You did a good job.
So we're after going through it in detail. So we're sitting here patiently, but I do believe Board Member Allen has a question, just
ready.
because that's Board Member Allen.
All I wanted to say is I just wanted to repeat from the other day, not exactly verbatim, but thank you for all your hard work, because I know you've been pushing the ball uphill a lot. So thank you for all the time and effort.
I had a lot of excellent help. I can guarantee you that. Thank you very much.
Does anybody have any questions about the proposed 21-22 budget? Okay, Mr. Williams, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
We'll go ahead and do
Appreciate
our motion. Board Member Campbell?
I move to approve the preliminary budget for year 2022 as presented.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the preliminary budget. Any discussion on that preliminary budget? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carries unanimously. We will move on, and yes, thank you, Mr. Williams. We do appreciate that. So, and Board Member Campbell, thank you for your finance report for this month. Item 7, this is our consent agenda for tonight. It is relatively lengthy. So if anybody would like to make a motion on our consent agenda, we'll do that now. And just for board members to know, the rest of the items will roll call vote from here on out. Okay?
I move to approve the consent agenda items as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second on all of our consent agenda items for tonight. Is there any discussion on these particular items? And the lights go on. Board Member Fritchie.
Thank you. Yes, because this is such a lengthy list, and I just wanted to make a couple of comments. First of all, that this, for someone who's just looking at this out in TV land, this is normal for this time of year. Very normal. Lots and lots of things that need to be approved so they can get rolling on that for next year. The second thing I'd like to say, and I know Board Member Campbell went through this at length in her, so I'll keep it snappy. But I just wanted to thank the technology department. Kevin wasn't at our board retreat on Friday to hear this, but I just want to thank you for all the excellent research that you all did to determine the best devices for purchase by the school district, and the fact that you really did dig in and get the staff, the teachers, to in essence test drive these items and get a wide range of folks who wanted to help and figure out what's the best device for our staff. It was quite impressive, the new Microsoft Surface Book 3, as well as the Smart Interactive Panel. I just know teachers out there are going to be thrilled to get this new technology, and it's just not about putting a fancy piece of technology in their hands. It's talking about the functionality and the portability of all of that too, for someone in a classroom to be able to just walk around the room and to be able to interact with the kids and with the technology. I think the students are really going to love it too, and I just really enjoyed seeing all of that firsthand. So thank you for including the right people in that process, and I think this is going to be a great purchase for our district. Thank you.
Appreciate those comments. Board Member Hedrick.
Yeah, I just didn't want it to go by because it is on the consent agenda, but the 7.04, the Comprehensive School Improvement Plan, how important that document is to the district in terms of being able to move us in a forward direction, but also to express a deep amount of appreciation to all of the staff who participated in that, including Dr. Kephart, who's not here this evening, but I think she kind of spearheaded that. And then all of our support staff in the buildings and our community and school community members who participated on that process and took, devoted a lot of their time and energy to that. So I just wanted to express my appreciation for that.
Thank you, Board Member Hedrick. Board Member Campbell.
That was exactly the item I was going to highlight and express my appreciation as well. I know in the work session we reviewed that in detail, so thank you to everyone that participated in creating that and clearly saying that this will be something that we're using in meetings, in daily life. I have mine as well, yes. The CLIMB acronym, I think, really says where we want achievement to go, and I'm just excited to have that strategic plan and want to thank everybody for their participation in building.
Appreciate that. Board Member Marshall.
Thank you. I have a question in regards to item 7.24 with the pre-ACT and ACT vouchers. My question is the testing, is it done during the normal school day or is it on a weekend?
So the vouchers are to be used for the weekend testing. It's the national testing, so the students will be responsible for signing up for the test and picking a location that works for them and for their families. So they will have some options to decide which test location and which test dates works best for them.
Okay, so a follow-up to that, for those students who may be impacted, do we help mitigate any transportation barriers if there are some that exist? How do students go about navigating that?
That's a great question. We have not discussed that to much extent. This year was our first year working through the voucher system. So we worked a lot with our guidance counselors to make sure kids could get to where they needed to get and help them get signed up for the test to the best of our abilities this year. So that's something that we could spend some time discussing, but we've not had that conversation.
Okay, thank you, that'd be great. Thank you.
And that's just for the ACT. The pre-ACT will be on site.
Right, yes. Thank you.
Other questions? I have two quick comments. Number one is I do think it's important, since it's in the consent agenda, that this does include the new naming of the middle school, to just make sure that people know we will be welcoming, well, let me rephrase. I shouldn't put the cart before the horse. Might be. Welcoming East Trails Middle School to the fold. And I promised my kids I would do this, so I really apologize. They will be stampeding into Lee Summit. And so that's my one. I'm sorry. I promised. So the bison will be coming.
Move to adjourn,
Right,
please.
right. So every now and again we have to, lighten up just a little here. So
And I love the colors.
Isaac, Eli, there you go. I got it in. Okay. The only other thing, truly for community awareness, next month our board meeting date is shifted from July 15th to July 22nd in order for some of our administrative team to be able to attend a professional development conference. So for people who are kind of keeping track of when our meetings are, I think that is important too, to make sure that they realize that our meeting will be July 22nd next month as well, and that's part of this consent agenda. Any other questions or comments? Okay, like I said, we'll do roll call votes for the remainder. So Ms. Ismark, we have a roll call vote, please.
Board Member Allen?
Aye.
Board Member Campbell? Aye. Board Member Sparks? Board Member Fritchie?
Aye.
Board Member Hedrick?
Aye.
Vice President Marshall?
Aye.
President Murdoch?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously, and we will move on to our items for decision tonight. We are at 8.01, so this is our middle school renovations GMP amendment number 1. So we'll take a motion on that, please.
I move that the board approve the guaranteed maximum price agreement number 1 to McCown Gordon Construction as detailed in the attachment.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for 8.01 for the middle school GMP amendment. Is there any discussion on this? I know it was one of the main points in the finance committee as well. Board Member Campbell.
I did have one additional comment that I wanted to add because I really appreciated that Kyle. Thank you. I really appreciated that Kyle shared this in the Finance Committee meeting. I wanted to call out the benefit that McCown Gordon has provided around this, because they really did a lot of work to bid these items out separately so that they could recover as much cost savings in this cost escalation era that we're in right now, as much savings for our district dollars as possible. And so that adds a lot of work to their work in managing these separately, but it's very much appreciated to us from a cost-benefit standpoint. So I did want to point that out as well. And thank you, Kyle, for highlighting that also.
It's a good addition. Thanks. Do appreciate that. Any other discussion around 8.01? Okay, Ms. Ismark, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Campbell? Board Member Sparks? Board Member Fritchie?
Aye.
Board Member Hedrick?
Aye.
Vice President Marshall?
Aye.
Board Member Allen?
Aye.
President Murdoch?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. We will move on to 8.02. This is the letter of intent related to the purchase of Paradise Park. And I'm actually going to turn this over to Dr. Buck or Dr. Miller. I'm not sure. Okay, both. I'll let them fight out who's going to talk first here. So just to give some of those details.
So as Dr. Miller comes up, I just want to first off thank everybody who's been involved in this. We've been involved in this over the course of the year. John and Julie Ellis approached us with an interest to continue the theme of edutainment as far as the discovery zone for early learners, and kind of full circle for them as they both start off as educators. As we worked, Dr. Miller and I worked with John and several other folks throughout the process. We did come to an agreement for a price, and I want to tell you that John and Julie are underselling the facility. It appraised as a property and building at $8.9 million, and they are willing to sell it to us for $6 million. That does not count some of the things they're going to leave inside of it. So this is over a $3 million donation, if you will, from John and Julie Ellis, because they really believe in a strong school district means a strong community, and they're very supportive of LSR7. So thank you to John and Julie. They probably wish I didn't say their names as much as I did, because they're very humble people, but what a great gift and what a great opportunity. So I'm going to have Dr. Miller kind of come up and talk a little bit about the potentials of what we're going to utilize with the building and facility-wise, and answer any questions you have logistically.
Thanks, Dr. Buck. You know, in a year that's provided challenges, it's also provided a wonderful opportunity for the school district. You know, the voters supported the school district in passing the 2020 bond, where we identified that early education would be a priority. We since learned that this would become available to the district. And we went through a due diligence period. As Dr. Buck indicated, we went through an appraisal, appraised at $8.9 million. We've done a structural assessment of the property. We're conducting a phase 1 environmental study. And again, this is a letter of intent, so we'll get some of that information back. We had our commercial insurance carrier go out and walk the property to make sure that, understand what the level of risk is. So again, we feel like we've done our due diligence bringing this forward to you. And again, what a wonderful opportunity given to us by John and Julie Ellis for us to consider tonight. Really, the purpose of the facility is first and foremost to support our early education students. But because of the unique campus, the 15 acres that comes with the property, not only is it a 37,000 square foot facility that's in good shape, already designed for early education through the Discovery Center, there's a variety of activities that we feel like we could benefit our students, you know, potentially BASS and some other secondary programs, which we're still exploring, but really first and foremost our early education students. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. We're excited about this opportunity.
And as everybody gets ready for questions, just to add to that, not only have we brought in those folks, Dr. Whaley went over and checked technology-wise, Kyle Grell's been over there many times. We've had a lot of staff members over there, too, assessing what the possibilities and roadblocks might be with the facility. And so if you think about when you walk into Paradise Park, to the left is the Discovery area. That we're hoping to keep intact, and both Great Beginnings and the new Early Childhood Center could access those facilities, and then build out on the right side or upstairs for classroom space. So it is a great opportunity for value added, plus meeting the intent of the bond.
Okay, we will lead off. It was a very close race, but it was board member Fritchie who got the button first.
Wow, I won something. Okay. Well, I just wanted to point out in this, because I think this question is probably going to come up among those out there in the audience, and so I want to anticipate some of those questions, and that is that when we voted for the bond package, it was the idea that was presented was that we would use a portion of the existing building of Prairie View Elementary School for our second early childhood center. And I think everyone was very enthusiastic about another early childhood center because they know that our wait list is so long for that programming. Can you tell us how then, if we agree to go forward with this project in Paradise Park, which I think is a great idea, by the way, but what's that mean for the other project?
And I'm gonna start with a conversation I had with early education this morning, and I feel like in visiting with Carrie Boehm this morning and the feedback that she's received, she feels like Paradise Park is an absolute good fit for their program considering the current design. Shifting to your question specifically is Prairie View Elementary. And really, you know, again, when we go back and look at what has transpired over 2021, other needs have emerged. You know, what we're planning for next year is to start at Prairie View Elementary is our R7 online elementary program. So we know that that program has already expanded tremendously over this year. So that will be a starting point at Prairie View next year.
So they have the classroom space for that.
They do.
With
yes.
very little changes to be made.
Correct. Mhm.
Okay, thank you.
And we'll continue to evaluate the need for that space and the use of that space.
Thank you.
Dr. Miller, I'm just going to follow up on that question because I think it would be important for people to note the logistics of having the feasibility after we were starting to study trying to get early childhood into Prairie View, that it was going to be expensive, right? I mean, is that a fair question?
So we, in the bond package, it was $9 million for renovations at Prairie View Elementary.
But we were encountering some logistical issues in terms of trying to figure that out. Is that correct? In terms of putting early childhood in there, right? That we were.
We went through several renovation options, and some of them exceeded the $9 million, and we were continuing to work that plan.
Explore,
Yes.
right? Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Just
thank you. Sorry.
There we go.
Yeah, I think what you're trying to
my
get to
bad.
is our initial work looked like $9 million wasn't going to be sufficient.
Yeah,
Correct. That's
right.
right.
Okay.
At Prairie View.
Board Member Hedrick.
I just think it's important for to ask the question in terms of how we can pay for this facility. And my assumption is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that we're planning to use bond resources. And so I think there's been questions about, that wasn't specifically identified in the ballot language, but I just wanted you to address that question more so for our community.
Thank you, Board Member Hedrick. Yes, we do plan to use bond resources, specifically those targeted for early education initiative. In visiting with bond counsel, we did in the language on the ballot that referenced purchase of land. So that would be broad enough for us to consider this moving forward.
Board Member Campbell.
Actually, that was my question, just to clarify that the purchase money would be part of the bond budget.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Board Member Allen.
I know, hard to believe I've got a comment, but I just appreciate the fact that this opportunity came forward and that the initiative and idea was largely put out there by John and Julie, certainly. Here we are X number of years later that they were intimately involved with the effort around Great Beginnings, and we have an interesting sort of celebration out there tomorrow night. And here we are kind of coming full circle so that Paradise Park can be dedicated to early education. So, it's largely community spirit, largely involvement through the foundation, large involvement through a number of people in this room, and the historical reflection of where we are as a community. So thanks for getting this over the goal line, all of those involved, as well as certainly the Ellis family. So outstanding.
Appreciate the comment. Board Member Fritchie.
Yeah, just to add to that, what you were saying, Mike, was I think Paradise Park has been a favorite for kids and adults for so many years, and that it's going to just continue to be a very special place in the lives of our students in the future. And I love that legacy is there, that they had the vision. I think John and Julie had the vision to create that edutainment, what they call the edutainment center for the kids. And I've taken my own grandkids through there, and they've just loved it, and I can't see anything but great things happening and I don't know what we're going to call it, because I know we don't probably call it Great Beginnings 2, or maybe something with Paradise or Park or something in there would be really cool. But I remember that John and Julie started before they actually built that building with a little building called Putter's Paradise and 2 miniature golf routes. And was my oldest daughter's first job. ever, and it was a great first job for a kid. So John and Julie have contributed so much to our community, and I think they continue to do that through this proposal to the school district and this opportunity. So I just wanted to really thank them.
Board Member Sparks.
I have 2 questions. The first question is how many students do we think would be affected by us purchasing Paradise Park? How many are we gaining access for?
Yeah. That's a good question. So we talked, I think, in a previous board meeting about 365 students total for early education. So right now we currently have 7 satellite classrooms. Is that correct, Stacy? 7 satellite classrooms. We have a number of students on a wait list. So, our goal would be, 1, minimally accommodate the 7 satellite classrooms, plus hopefully expand to 5, 6, 7 classrooms in addition to that. Some of that will depend on, we have to go through and work with Hollis and Miller and actually look at capacity and how many classrooms we can fit in. But if we leave the Discovery Play area intact, we, in visiting with some early ed folks this morning, we may be able to construct a little bit smaller classrooms because they will be moving through that center-based activity area. So I can't give you a specific number, but we're hoping to, again, expand upon what our satellites currently offer.
Making this move, would it, just with our numbers that we currently have now, would it eliminate any waiting lists?
I think what we're hoping to do is reduce that waiting list. Yes, we're hoping to open additional classrooms.
Okay, but we're not sure if it would technically eliminate what our current waiting list would be if we was able to open up tomorrow with everything in place of what we're speculating for it to be.
And I'd actually have to work with Stacy and early education team to actually look at quantify the numbers and get that back to you if that's okay. Okay.
And then just in a spirit of transparency, what is the process when we're purchasing land, buildings, making sure that our appraisals are competitive and things of that nature? Can you kind of explain what that process looked like so that the community know what we actually do from step 1 of wanting to acquire land, or someone bring a proposal to us as a district, and then how do we actually go into this point to where we're ready to make a letter of intent?
Sure. And really, we started with some preliminary just discussions internally and between John Ellis, and really talked about the viability of the property, and that took time. That took several months. And then it was really, internal discussions. We brought that to the board, again, because it was such a weighty decision, because that was a community vote, right, in June. And we wanted to make sure that what we were proposing stayed within the spirit of what the voters acted on. And so gathering feedback and input from the Board of Education, we went through that due diligence period again, and making sure that we went out, got 3 separate quotes for the appraisal, and again, selected a firm to go through and do a commercial appraisal. Again, that music walkthrough, have Hollis and Miller do the structural assessment to make sure we're actually assessing the conditions of the building and not just walking into something. You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments related to 8.02? Okay, Ms. Ismer, could we have a roll call vote, please?
Could we have a motion first?
Oh. Yeah, we probably should, shouldn't we? See, that's why you're here. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Can we get a motion, please?
I move that the Board of Education approves the letter of intent to purchase Paradise Park located at 1021 Northeast Colburn Road, Lee Summit, Missouri, 64086.
Second.
Motion and a second for 8.02. I believe now we can have a roll call vote.
Board Member Sparks? Aye. Board Member Fritchie?
Aye.
Board Member Hedrick?
Aye.
Vice President Marshall?
Aye.
Board Member Allen? Board Member Campbell? President Murdoch?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. I'm excited what that can hold for us. 8.03, Monarch Construction Change Order number 3. If we could get a motion on this item, please.
I move that the board approves change order number 3 for the Lee Summit R7 District Athletics Facilities Project at a total cost of $177,900 $1,605.47 as detailed in the attachments.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second for 8.03. This is one of the items that we discussed during the finance report. Is there any questions or discussion related to this item? Okay, seeing or hearing none. Ms. Ismark, we have a roll call vote.
Board Member Fritchie?
Aye.
Board Member Hedrick?
Aye.
Vice President Marshall?
Aye.
Board Member Allen?
Aye.
Board Member Campbell? Board Member Sparks? President Murdoch?
Aye. The motion carries unanimously. We are moving on to 8.04. This is the school start time and bell time issue that was discussed at our work session. Dr. Miller, did you want to give a quick highlight of it in terms of what the final recommendation is? While she's coming up, this is one of the items that we discussed at length in the work session, especially centering around the community involvement and the team that helped put together this recommendation. Dr. Miller, we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, President Murdoch. Just doing a quick high-level overview. As Board Member Campbell indicated, we have had over 5,000 responses to our community survey, and we really tried to sift through that as this is a weighty topic that directly impacts students. So we wanted to be really mindful of what that information told us. And I can just share from a high-level view what the summary of that is. First and foremost, there will be no changes to walk zones. Again, as Keith Henry presented previously, we don't feel for the level of disruption that it would net us a significant impact on bus drivers. So again, we feel like making sure that we're transporting students. That's a service. We don't want to cut services. We want that would be the last resort. So there will be no changes to walk zones. Second piece of information, in the community survey, both staff and parents indicated with 85% that they would be open to changing late start days. So by doing that, we would be able to shift Wednesday late start collaboration to Friday, which would align with the early education non-instructional day, which would allow us to recoup approximately 10 bus drivers. So that was pretty significant in us saving that number of FTEs. So that's another recommendation, moving late start Wednesday to Friday. As we head into the next part of the recommendation, going back to the community survey, staff was pretty split when it came to moving middle school and high school to a later start time. Community had slightly favored, I want to say with 57%, moving middle schools to a later start time. So we ended up moving with that recommendation. So high schools, I believe, start, and Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, 7:25 a.m., so they push back 5 minutes. So pretty comparable to their current schedule. We will have 4 elementary schools that will be on Tier 2. And I want to point this out because this is significant. This is a change in what the 4 proposals that was presented to the community. So we'll have 4 elementary schools: Cedar Creek, Hawthorne Hill, Trail Ridge Elementary, and Highland Park Elementary. Trail Ridge Elementary and Highland Park Elementary were not originally on the first proposals, and I want to provide a brief explanation. In those original proposals, we had Trail Ridge Elementary and Summit Lakes Middle School dropping at the same time. That would cause a significant transportation issue on that campus. Same thing with Pleasant Lee Elementary and PLMS. So we had to reconfigure that recommendation. So those are the 4 early elementary schools. Middle school would move to Tier 3, which is an 8:20 start time. And then we would have 3 elementary schools that are, I believe it's Prairie View Elementary, LSC, and Greenwood that are at 8:25. Okay. And then our remaining elementary schools would be in that 5th tier. So that's our recommendation moving forward, and happy to answer any questions at this time.
What else do you have memorized?
That may be it.
That was good. That was good. Any questions or comments related to this? I know that this was obviously a very lengthy discussion that we had last Friday. Board Member Allen.
I'll make it quick. Are there a few that you can just quickly highlight the change? Like I noticed you emphasized we're changing a couple of schools by 5 minutes only before folks really think this is drastically, sliding to a different hour or something like that.
Correct. Prairie View Elementary, Greenwood, and LSE really only shift by 5 minutes. High school shift by 5 minutes. So there's, for those two particular tiers, not a significant change, correct? But I do want to illustrate, if our staffing pattern doesn't change between this year and next year, there's a potential, and I think, Mr. Henry identified Greenwood and LSE could potentially move the following year. So just keep that in mind. Again, that's not a guarantee. We're really hoping with some other decisions that are being made tonight, things will improve, and we wouldn't have to make that
And that
change.
was a move to, they would be a late elementary school. Just for anybody who is asking, that possibility would be for those two schools to move to the 9-10 start time. They'd be lumped with the other elementary schools.
Correct, for the
Just wanted to
22.
make sure that people
Right.
had that.
President Murdoch, I mean, this is truly like a Jenga game, but it's bigger, and Mission Impossible theme music is playing in the background at the same time that you're trying to jumble all of this. So it is amazing how much you get done, you and Mr. Henry and the staff. So nice job.
Keith Henry and Bruce Maples, all the credit. I mean, they've spent hours and hours working on this.
Board Member Campbell.
I do want to just put on the table, normally we charge the superintendent with operating the district. So bell time changes and things like that, normally the board would not be a part of approving or not approving those kinds of changes. But just validating that because this is a transportation and we're also looking at that shift from the late start from Wednesday to Friday, there's a lot of factors here. That's why it's coming before the board for approval. Is that accurate?
That's correct, because this is a more substantial shift. Bell times can change and fluctuate for schools on a year-to-year basis, but this is more significant.
Yeah, the impact to the calendar as well. Board Member Marshall.
Thank you. Dr. Miller, if you could just kind of summarize how, I know this was a logistic type of solution, but how, especially with the later elementary schools starting, specifically speaking about our Title I schools and the free and reduced lunch, how are those impacts mitigated with the changing of the schedules?
Sure. Okay, first, can you repeat the first part of your question? I think there was two in there.
It was just one.
Oh, it was just one, just what we, the middle, I'm sorry, the free and reduced lunch schools or the Title I schools?
Yeah.
Correct, the ones that are shifting to a later time.
So Meadow Lane Elementary is the one that's significantly shifting. Westview Elementary has historically been on that late start time, so they have run from a 9 to 4 schedules. But Meadow Lane, I think the big concern is communicating with families and making sure that they have the information so that they're prepared for the upcoming school year. So Meadow Lane has the most significant shift. LSE, again, it's just a 5-minute shift. Is there more information that you're wanting from that?
Yeah, I was going to say, so one of the buildings is moving 5 minutes, one's 10 minutes, but there is one building moving to a totally different tier. But they will still serve breakfast and lunch and have, if you're qualified for free or reduced lunch, they'll have free or reduced breakfast and lunch at those facilities.
Any other questions or comments related to 8.04, the school start times? Okay, I think we still need a motion on this particular item before we can have a vote. Miller, sorry. So yeah, we'll take a motion now.
I move that the Board of Education approve the proposed bell times for the 2021-2022 school year.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve 8.04. Last chance, any other discussion? Ms. Hismer, can we have a roll call vote, please?
Board Member Hedrick.
Aye.
Vice President Marshall.
Aye.
Board Member Allen.
Aye.
Board Member Campbell. Board Member Sparks. Board Member Fritchie.
Aye.
President Murdoch.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. As a result of essentially 8.04 and why it's going in this order, 8.05 is revising the school calendar. The two things that we just need to highlight there is that we're moving our late start days from Wednesdays to Fridays, and that's really then also to make sure that we stay in alignment with Great Beginnings as their or early childhood to have their non-attendance day stay on Friday as well. To give them the 4-day school week. So we would take a motion here on 8.05 unless there's something, Dr. Buck, that you wanted to add on that.
I just want to point out it also gains 2 hours of instruction over the course of the year by doing this.
There you go. So we'll take a motion on 8.05.
I move that the Board of Education approves the recommended revised 2021-2022 academic calendar.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve 8.05. Is there any questions or comments related to this item? Seeing and hearing none. Mrs. Smart, roll call vote, please.
Vice President Marshall?
Aye.
Board Member Allen? Board Member Campbell? Board Member Sparks? Board Member Fritchie?
Aye.
Board Member Hedrick?
Aye.
President Murdoch?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Moving to 8.06. This is a transportation salary schedule adjustment in our efforts to continue to recruit transportation staff to fill bus driving positions. Dr. Buck or Dr. Miller, did you want to introduce or highlight this particular information?
We'll both do it again.
Okay.
So we presented at the board retreat the strategy used by another district to increase pay rate. We are still in the top 3 at starting step 9, and step 18. But we often lose drivers just like other districts do, not necessarily to other districts. We're competing against private industry. It's a national bus driver shortage because people can make quite a bit of money right now driving trucks over the road. So the competition there is steep. The board directed us to look at adding steps and thus also with or changing ranges, as well as looking at changing ranges of other positions within the transportation department to best put our foot forward, not only to attract, but also to retain staff. And I'll let Dr. Miller, if she wants to talk about the actual recommendation you have in front of you.
Thank you, Dr. Buck. And as Dr. Buck mentioned, we did take a look at a metro area school district that's been fairly aggressive with starting hourly compensation for bus drivers. That district is at $8.50 an hour. $18.50 an hour. Thank you. And so our proposal is to move bus drivers from range 17 to range 21. Their beginning hourly compensation would be $18.47. One of the things that's important to note is the strength of our salary schedule. It gains ground in the middle and at the end. So that would really push us ahead, step 9 and again step 18. In working with Deanna Keller, our payroll coordinator, one of the things that we drilled down to and took a look at is where are our current bus drivers. So out of our 98 bus drivers, 66 of them are in years 1 through 9. So they're at the front end of the salary schedule. So I do think this recommendation will be a recruiting tool. It will help in retention. While we want to say that this will fix the issue, we cannot guarantee that, but we do think it will be an incentive for folks.
And before we move on, I want to add that if you look at that chart in front of you, the motion to earlier on 8.04 that you approved, that actually reduces the number of FTE bus drivers we need, which is actually a savings of $725,000. So with all these switches and ranges for bus drivers, then obviously to positions they could move up to, because we want to make sure if you move up to, you're going to a higher range. That equates to a total increase in the budget of $133,370, considering you had a savings of reduction of FTEs by action of 8.04.
Questions in well, actually, here, let's do this, and let's do specific questions for Dr. Miller, Board Member Hedrick, because I was going to say we could do a motion and then a discussion. Okay, go ahead, Board Member Hedrick, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. My question really specifically was about in reference to Dr. Buck's just his most recent comment. Maybe this is wishful thinking on my part, but I'm thinking that if some of these, the salary changes and the hour changes that we're considering, if they're approved, if that really helps us attract drivers, and would we then add drivers knowing that next year we're going to lose some to retirements, et cetera, and that, or that this 25 is a firm number, that we're not going to fill those even if we have applicants and can? That's really my question. Because, I go back to long range in terms of what changes might be needed in the following year, 22, 23, because of, our change to middle school, et cetera, and just wondering kind of if you've thought through that process.
So, and I will do my best to answer this question, and if Keith, if you feel free to step in if you like. So really, both the 21-22 proposal and then the second year after that, the 22-23 proposal, really looks at a core number of 119 drivers in both scenarios. And if we can maintain those drivers, I believe, Keith, correct me if I'm wrong, that will accommodate both years that was presented to the board. Correct.
I'm sorry, clarify for me, how many drivers did you just mention?
119 route drivers.
Okay, so in the board packet, it has a current number of staff of 99.
Mm-hmm.
Is that, or am I missing?
So really, our base number was 144 drivers that we have scheduled this year. We would do a reduction of 25 drivers.
Okay, so really that number should be 119 instead of 99?
Well, if you look below it, there's a number identified for number of vacant bus drivers. There's actually two lines.
Sorry, I missed that one. I didn't even see it. Sorry. Okay, got it. Okay, no more questions. Sorry, thank you.
Any other questions, Board Member Hedrick?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Okay. Board Member Campbell? Okay. We'll take a motion then on this item. Don't go anywhere in case we have any other questions here, if that's okay. So we'll take a motion on item 8.06.
Okay, I'm going to make this motion, and because I've read it in advance and it doesn't really say, I don't think really what we needed to say. I move that the Board of Education approve the transportation salary schedule adjustment for administrative secretary, bus driver, driver trainer, dispatch router, safety specialist, standby driver, and coordinator.
There we go. Got a motion and a second here on 8.06. And now, Board Member Campbell.
I just wanted to highlight for this item as well as the past two, you all had a problem, right, with bus driver shortage and transportation, and how do we get our students where they need to be to learn. And then you went through the steps of looking at this from all options. And even before we visited some of those options, you had done research, gone out and talked with people at the schools, and really gathered what are the very best options and recommendations we could look at. And then you took the step to reach out to our parents in our community and do a survey to get their input on what those options were. So I just want to say thank you for all of that hard work, and thank you to everyone else who participated in that process, because it wasn't an easy problem to solve, and you looked at it from all angles and options to really evaluate the best options for our students, and that's what transportation joke, that's what drives us every day. And so
passing the baton.
I just wanted to reiterate the hard work and effort that went into getting us to here and say thank you for that process and thank you for that hard work.
Any other questions or comments? Board Member Sparks?
Can you, I know we know, but can you share with the public, this motion also give guaranteed minimum hours of 6 instead of 5? What was the purpose of that?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up, Board Member Sparks. Yes, so when we also surveyed, and I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, we also surveyed our transportation department and what they thought would be the most benefit to recruiting and retention. So by far, number one was the hourly compensation. But the second thing that they requested was to increase their daily guaranteed maximum hours. And so currently, guaranteed minimum hours, currently they are at 5 hours a day or 25 hours a week, and that would earn them the ability to earn benefits. And so we would not only increase their hourly compensation, but also add an additional hour per day, which is significant, which all bus drivers have requested. Thank you for asking that.
Any other questions or comments related to 8.06? Okay, Ms. Ismark, we have a roll call vote, please.
Board Member Allen? Board Member Campbell? Board Member Sparks? Board Member Fritchie?
Aye.
Board Member Hedrick?
Aye.
Vice President Marshall?
Aye.
President Murdoch?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. 8.07 is our ESSER 3 non-allocated FTE positions. I know we have had this discussed already, but is there any extra that we need on this one that you need?
No, I just want to remind everyone that, so ESSER 3, we were notified on May 27th that we're going to have a little over $10 million. That is currently not in the state budget, so the legislators haven't had a chance to put that in the state budget. So we cannot receive these funds till we expend them first, and then we ask for reimbursement, but we cannot do that until the state legislators put it in there. While DESE is very confident that the state legislators will, I just want to put that caveat. It currently is not in the state budget. Out of that, just slightly over $10 million, ESSER 3 rules that came out on May 27th said 20%. Has to spent to address gaps that have happened because of COVID. We, as a group, a large group, grassroots group at the building level, all the way up to this building, have come up with a list that's over 30% of the funds being spent on that. So this is the positions that will be off-ramped, if you will, have an ending date. These are not permanent positions. These are positions that will exist only until ESSER 3 funds will be out. ESSER 3 has a 2-year window with a, for the most part, a guaranteed 3rd-year extension. So we have 3 years to spend the funds, and each year is about $1.1 million.
Appreciate that synopsis. We could take a motion on 8.07, please.
I'd like to move that the board approve the non-allocated addition of the 9. Am I on the wrong? Yeah, 9 positions requested.
It'll be okay. Yeah, that'll be all right. Need a second. Anybody want a second? Okay, motion and a second for 8.07 to approve the ESSER non-allocated FTEs. One quick thing I would highlight on this one is the credit recovery facilitators. That's going to be big, and also it'll take some of the pressure off of SRA, which really stepped up this year to help. And I think that that's worth noting. Principal Campbell there stepped up to help other buildings with credit recovery stuff, so that will be huge for buildings throughout the district. Okay, Ms. Ismark, we have a roll call vote, please.
Board Member Campbell? Aye. Board Member Sparks? Board Member Fritchie?
Aye.
Board Member Hedrick?
Aye.
Vice President Marshall?
Aye.
Board Member Allen?
Aye.
President Murdoch?
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Moving to 9.01, this is our technology annual program evaluation. So we will turn it over to Dr. Whaley.
Good evening. I want to start off tonight outlining our technology leadership team. The people that serve as the overall leadership group for the tech department includes myself, our data systems director, Dan Mullen. Dan oversees basically anything involving data in the district, so lots of different systems. There used to be a chart that I couldn't locate that really identified all the bits and pieces that kind of fed into all the different systems. So that's a lot what Dan does. Kenzie Wooderson is our network services coordinator. She handles all the access points, servers, phones, anything that kind of plugs into something. That's kind of Kenzie's role. And then, of course, Tony Dixon, who's our technology support coordinator, he handles the tier 1, 2, 3 support for all of our hardware. And really, if something breaks through the help desk ticket system, if we need to order equipment, he's an integral part of that. With that, here's a little closer look at our org chart. We've got 53 department members. As you see, we are under the operations side of the house. That's under Dr. Emily Miller. Out to the side, I should mention 3 key people with my group. Michelle Siebert, she's a tech specialist 3, but I like to think of her as a offensive and defensive coordinator, a firefighter, a traffic cop, just depending on the day. And she really keeps TLT really running and kind of coordinated because we're often out and about. Also, Ashley Martin handles all of our purchasing. So if you can imagine how many items get purchased on a day-to-day basis, she's out seeking costs and things like that and really kind of organizing that work. And then also Janet Stodinger, she handles the Chromebook ins and outs, so our 18,000 devices. She coordinates with site and field techs to make sure when a student comes in, they have a device in a timely manner. She collects the old ones, cleans them. She does a lot of work with the repairs and all of those things. So it's quite the group. And then, of course, under each of us in TLT, Dan, Kenzie, Tony, they each have specialists that work for them. So when I say specialists, their title's not necessarily specialists, but it's a job that fulfills a very unique or specific role. And even though they do have those specific roles, it's a very collaborative team. So for instance, I would give the example to save some costs with our bond work when it came time to demo Lee Summit High School. Tony put out a phone call and said, hey, we need all hands on deck to go take out access points, switches, move labs. And I can tell you probably 4 or 5 people in this building at least, plus several site and field techs gathered the weekend before Memorial Day. I think we started on a Thursday. We thought it was going to take 2 days, and we were done in about, I'd say, 4, 5, 6 hours. So it's a really collaborative team. So it's really neat to see everybody come together. By design, I've already kind of mentioned it, we oversee the network, data systems, all the device and hardware maintenance, and of course the end user support. But the most important part of our job with regard to support is collaboration. And so a great example, thank you for your approval tonight of the new teacher devices and the smart panels. That was a collaborative effort with instruction every step of the way. We collaborated with teachers, administrators. It really kind of comes together where we're taking information, answering tough questions, which we love, to make sure we're not missing things before we bring things to you for approval. So we really do value collaboration. With that, our work is always aligned. Since I came to the district in 2012, our work in technology is always aligned strategically to CSIP. So for this cycle, Destination 2021, it was really about maintaining and improving technology resources. That sounds really simple, but there's a lot of pieces that go to that. And I'm just going to briefly highlight some of those things in just a bit. As far as our budget, $3.8 million in operating, that pays for, obviously, office supplies, things like that, but also parts for machines that break, servers that break, switches that break, anything we might need for repair or to add, teacher replacements. So, tonight you approved a big batch of teacher replacements. Part of that budget is going to help pay for that. 2020-21, we had a capital expenditures budget of just over $6 million. That seems really high compared to the upcoming 21-22, but that included $4 million worth of Chromebook leases that we paid off. And then we took our $1.4 million in capital money that was earmarked for Future Ready. And if you recall, back in the fall, we brought VDI, virtual desktop integration, to you because that was a need we needed right then to meet the needs of kids who needed to access Windows-based programs at home. So we're really flexible, and we try and adjust again to those needs that come up. Stakeholder planning and process, I already mentioned collaboration, super important. Our TLT is really the heart of the department with a lot of support behind us with all the folks that work within. Also, I represent technology on superintendent's leadership team, also district leadership team. We had representation on the new CSIP, and then again, I can't emphasize enough the collaboration that takes place across the district. So we had 3 goals this year. One is the overall CSIP goal, the CSIP that just expired, if you will. And then we had goals 2 and 3. And 2 is really taking a really solid look at assessing, maintaining, and replacing, looking way ahead, not just 5 years, but perhaps 6, 7, 8. Because we know some of these things, like VDI, they have about a 5-year life cycle, and that was a big chunk of money. And so what we don't want to do is find ourselves in a year where we have to expend a lot of money to make up something that might be replaced. So that was kind of a goal of ours, is to really start looking at some of those really, really long-range costs. One to be aware of that's coming up, our fiber network. We have our own district fiber network. It's about 20 years old, and the spec'd lifespan was 20 years, so we're coming up on that. It could last a lot longer than that, but those are the things we're really starting to pay attention to make sure we don't have an outage that we can't fix quickly. Goal 3, security. Cybersecurity is a really big issue right now, schools, businesses, even at home. So that was another goal of ours to really start diving into cybersecurity, and you're going to hear more about that in just a second. With that, measurement tools and associated data. With Goal 1, TLT meets every week on Mondays. Michelle, like I said, she kind of quarterbacks the agendas, gets all the information, and it's really neat. I always associate the technology department. It's truly a lot of cogs, just like a lot of departments are. But simply, adopting a new type of teacher device, that affected Dan's team with how we name devices and how they go into our systems to image them and label them, and there's just so many pieces. And so we all really have to be on the same page with regard to what happens in tech. Also, because I'm new to this position this year, one of my goals in my evaluation was to meet with every department member. And so I met with 49. Even though we have 52 department members, we had some missing positions at the time. But it took a couple months, and I learned a ton. But most importantly, we discovered that the needs of the department, just listening and taking notes, communication rose to the top. Our department members really want to be communicated with more. The request for professional development, for instance, Schoology. Even though a site tech or a field tech really doesn't support Schoology, that's usually who somebody goes to if they need quick help with Schoology. So the request for professional development was very evident. And then also increased access to key systems. So for instance, we just opened up the ability for field techs to create guest wireless passwords in a building. And so that's just one small adjustment where they were having to go to the building secretary. Well, if the secretary wasn't there, we're just adding steps. So trying to evaluate the appropriate level of access, but also making things a little bit easier for our team. So we continue to evaluate that. We also, the board approved several months ago, contracting with a new E-rate consultant. There was a little cost increase associated with that. But I promise you, I think we've made our money back with that group. They have done a great job sitting down with us, evaluating prior years, really sitting down and determining, did you guys know you could, other districts are using this funding for this, and this, and that's helping balance those costs over our 5-year E-rate cycle. So they've been great to work with. And then the little line, the data center, which was approved last year, and the VDI projects were completed. Seems really simple, like, oh, that's a nice little bullet, but there's a lot of steps that went into that, that it was quite the accomplishment for the tech team. So we got that done. Goal 2, again, long-range planning. We sat down with business services, Dr. Miller, Steve, lots of different people. And again, I think partly because I was new, but also we wanted just to make sure we went line by line through our budget, hoping to learn more information, figure out what could be eliminated with the goal of that long-term planning. So really to kind of look ahead. But also more importantly, to look ahead to our Future Ready Challenge, which was if we switch to a new teacher device or if we adopt a district standard, is it feasible? Is it affordable? And so that's what led us to the recommendation tonight. So that was very beneficial in that work. Also, we created the start of a technology systems plan through 27-28. Those are just the big bullet items. So for instance, we know the fiber network may need to be upgraded, replaced. We don't have dollar amounts, we don't have timelines, things like that. That will be next year's work. And obviously, I won't touch on these two because we've talked about them a lot tonight and in the work session, but the teacher device selection team for the new devices, and then also the IFP team. Finally, goal 3, Google audit, Google Workspace for Education. I think that has changed names 2 or 3 times now. It was Google Apps for Education, and Kyle, do you remember what it was to start? Google, was it just Google Apps? G Suite, yes. So now it's Google Workspace for Education. We took an audit that was performed by a third-party company about 1.5 years ago, and we went through that audit page by page. We identified roughly 13 items that needed to be addressed to up our security within Google. And then more importantly, Kenzie Wooderson went to a Morenet conference, and she won a cybersecurity audit in a drawing. And so that was about 1.5 years ago. Don't quote me on that date. But a third party came in, Morenet came in and did a cybersecurity audit. And from that audit, TLT went through line by line, and we identified 45 items that we need to address. So that work has already started, and that's going to be the focus of a lot of our work next year. So strengths and celebrations. Again, I touched on increasing department communication, PD, increasing the access to the tech staff. Also, something we've needed for a while that we were able to get done, we established 986 Help for students, so it's a dedicated student helpline. We're keeping the student ticket system open. That was put in place during COVID, but we're just going to continue it. We have, if that number gets called, it actually rings the desk of every site and field tech until somebody picks it up. So it's a pretty neat little system. It's been pretty responsive. Kids enjoy having it. Definitely families enjoyed having it when they were at home. So that was a big win for students across the district. We're going back to a leasing model, which again we've talked about with the devices and the smart panels. And then bond projects. This is a big one. This is something I really love to do. I enjoy it. We work closely with Kyle and Kent to tear things out in renovation and make sure they're going to go back on time, or to middle school forward, just keep an eye on things. We'll work on various projects. So Kenzie's meeting with the designers of that project to talk about easements and where the fiber is going to come across the road and how it's going to get to middle school 4. So there's just a lot of moving pieces in those projects that we're keeping an eye on from a tech standpoint. And then, of course, workstations and flat panels. Opportunities for improvement. We are starting to evaluate line by line again, opportunities to save costs. One that will come to you, I believe in September, is our Microsoft licensing. Typically, that's been bid through CDW, which is on a state contract or a negotiated contract. Using our partnership through MoreNet, which is where we pull our internet service, I think we're going to be able to save around $20,000 just by bidding it differently. And so please know we're going through those items just to see where we might be able to pull in just a few dollars here and there. Also, big for us, incident response. How will we respond? I hate to say it, if and when a cyber incident occurs, or even a natural disaster occurs. So what if, Lee Summit West, which is where some of our data is held, is hit by a fire or tornado? How will we recover from that? So we will be putting together those plans, and we'll have those basically to prepare, monitor, respond, and reflect. So those are kind of the 4 key focus areas. Also, improve the technology support model through increased cross-training. As you know, people go in and out through, this year especially, quarantine, whatever it might have been. And when I mentioned those specialized areas, for instance, we have one person that handles phones. We are starting to create a model where we've trained out to a second, third, and perhaps even a 4th person, so we can continue to respond if somebody were to go out. So that's kind of the focus of TLT next year, is to figure out how to get that done. Our evaluation questions, new CSIP was just approved tonight. And so a big CSIP goal, the CSIP goal for technology, is to maintain a safe, secure, and modern technology infrastructure. Those questions there, I won't read through each one of them, but because I've already kind of mentioned them, but really you can see the focus is around cybersecurity. So we're going to really focus our efforts on that. In the department's operating budget for 21-22, we've earmarked a pretty substantial amount of money just for cybersecurity, and look for things. We want to balance. We don't want to make it miserable for the end user. So for instance, we could recommend that computers time out every 5 minutes, but that doesn't work for teaching because you've got to have that time. So we want to balance end user experience, but also best practice. But we might start sending out phishing emails. So a random, hey, click on this link and give your employee ID number, and it will respond back to them. So look for things like that to come. Finally, I think this is, these are our action steps. Obviously, developing the infrastructure plan, an incident response plan, a disaster recovery plan. I've already mentioned the internal infrastructure, taking a long range, really go out and look, but also implementing our smart panels, implementing our Microsoft Surface Book 3s. That's going to be quite the project to get those out. Hopefully there's no equipment shortages that are super significant, but that's something we're monitoring. Upgrading Business Plus sounds like a really simple thing, but there's a lot of pieces that touch that. Dan's team's going to be leading the work on that. And then finally, I've already mentioned getting our classroom technology up to speed. So with that, I went through that as quickly as possible, and I will be happy to answer questions.
We appreciate the update. Questions and comments? Board Member Hedrick?
Yeah, I just have one quick question, and it goes back to your slides where you identified when you've had your audits, the 13 areas and then the 45 items that need attention. How or will that impact your needs for staffing or other resources?
Right now, let's just take the second bullet to help answer that question. With the 45 action items, we have a tracking, a project sheet, and it's identified timeline, associated costs, who's responsible, and right now, it's going to be farmed out to the individual departments that oversee those areas. And so staffing-wise, we don't see an impact. Now, what we don't know is we're just starting to hear technology departments in schools, so for instance, Park Hill or across the state, Rockwood, districts like that are starting to look at possibly creating a cybersecurity position. I don't know if we're there yet, so we're just too early in the process.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments related to the technology report? Board Member Allen.
Real quick, Kevin, Mr. Whaley, excuse me. You guys end up learning quite a bit from a North KC situation or Parkville, or, you know, some of those issues. City of Independence had a bit of an issue. I mean, collaboration obviously is pretty strong, pretty key.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Depends on the districts, but yeah, we're all members of organizations. We've recently joined one. We get cybersecurity alerts every day. They're coded, you know, white, green, yellow, red. We talk with other districts often. There's Missouri Technology Group. It's other tech directors across the state. And so, yeah, the social network is very good with regard to what are you doing, how should we handle or look out for this. Yes.
Board Member Sparks.
Just have two questions. The first one is the 986 help number. How is that being communicated to all of our students so that they know that if they need help, that's what they need to call to get that help?
Absolutely. Katie Bergen helped push that 986 help number out at the start. Buildings have it on their website. A lot of buildings have it on their websites. Kyle, correct me if I'm wrong, anytime you help teachers, you've got a quick card that has that number on it for teachers to give students. Okay. Our online students are given that number, so it's continuing to be communicated in different ways.
And then the second question is, with the audit, when we see the items that we need to identify, how do we prioritize them for corrective action?
Sure. So TLT sat down, we looked at the 45 items, and we did a combination of things. We picked the low-hanging fruit, the really easy things we could attack today that had a low impact cost, and then we also picked what we would consider the most critical, and so ones that needed to be addressed today. So if you picture that stoplight model of the white, yellow, green, or white, green, yellow, red, if we saw something that we said this needs to be handled in the next month, it's probably already been taken care of. So it just kind of depends on what it was and which area the champion for it, how much they felt it was important to address in relation to the others.
Any other questions or comments related to technology?
Maybe technology can work on the air conditioning. I'm just thinking it's a little warm, but, you know, it's just me.
That's facilities.
Oh, that's not technology. You need to apologize to Dr. Whaley.
Kyle girl.
But Kyle.
I thought we'd set that automatically dial it in through technology.
Oh. Technology right there. He could have fixed it himself. Thank you, Dr. Whaley. We appreciate it. We are going to move on to our final presentation here under 9.02. You made it. You stayed through. You're here. You did it. We are going to do the Lee Summit High School project update. Thank you for bearing with us. So.
Mic on. Shout out to Board Member Fritchie, my old principal. I'm going to do that every time just so everybody knows. All right, so this colorful picture is a floor plan of Lee Summit High School. And all the colored areas are the areas that we are currently tearing up. So you can see in here, let me try to explain, give you some bearing here. So if you're you're driving by the road, the outer road here, this is what this would be the front of the building. This is where that infamous tiger head is. So the orange part's the addition. And there's 2 phases of the addition. So this is current phase, and then this is the second phase. And then you can see cafeteria right now is all torn up. And we have the field house has some renovations. It's mostly around it. It's the units mostly around it, so you won't see full new field house. And the PAC is going to have some modifications, but you're not going to see full new PAC. Those already look pretty good, but this lobby is going to have some updated flooring. And then this green area here, we have the science wing in here. That is currently undergoing some renovation as well. So I'll click through so you can kind of get a little idea. And really, just from the time of this presentation, creation to now, it looks totally different. So, I mean, things are happening really fast right now in summertime. So, you know, just keep driving by, keep checking it out. It's changing every day. But this is the front of the field house. Got to tear a big hole. It's a really big hole now. But this is where the addition will be going. So that's establishing that footprint to come out from that field house, and it'll be where your central admin area is going to be located, right around in here. So that's undergoing construction now, and then undergoing renovation is the kitchen. So in the serving area, we have a lot of infrastructure going above that. So this serving area won't change a ton. It already looks pretty good. There were some recent renovations already done to that, but the seating area is going to get a nice little facelift. So right now, all this is torn down. Doesn't even look like this anymore. But we're going to be doing some infrastructure modifications and some upgrades there. This is that locker room area. So the locker rooms around the field house and then in the downstairs portion are also getting renovated this summer. So that is showing the start of that. This is that science wing that we're talking about. We're actually putting a new electrical room right in this side here. And this is going to become, you know, that if you've been there, that nice parking area where people go up the hill and park. Now that's going to be nice green space when we're all done, but that won't happen this summer. That's going to happen next summer, but right by that's where the science wing is. So we are currently renovating that. And then this is the upstairs portion of that L, where we're renovating that whole second story of that building. We call it level 3 because you actually drop a level when you go down to the B building. So there's a lot underway. It has changed a ton even from that. I did want to let you guys know that you can keep up with us on this community website. All our monthly updates are going to be posted on this community website, along with what's called a augmented reality, where you can actually get a app, JDUN AR, on your phone, and you can scroll over this picture, and that model will pop up, and it'll give you some different picture locations that show what that's going to look like. So you guys have access to that, and that's our community website to keep you guys up to date. And just for President Merck, we have a tiger by the tail right now. So, but it's going to look great.
It has to go from Board Member Campbell to you. So the baton is going to go. We'll just pass it around.
Any questions?
Questions or comments? Board Member Fritchie?
I just couldn't let this one go by. I have to give a shout out to Mike Childs, who was featured in our local newspaper last Saturday, the Lee Summit Tribune. He is an LSHS grad. He wore his letter jacket to our groundbreaking ceremony, which was really cool. Yeah, and it still fits. Yeah, there you go. And great job, Mr. Project Manager.
Okay, well, thank you.
Yeah, I did want to ask you one question. When you walk through that cafeteria portion of the building, do you ever think of CFS Day with happy thoughts?
I actually got to enjoy in one of our pre-con meetings. We actually got to partake in CFS Day.
Very good. Well, I know that was a favorite.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, that was a favorite in our building too, man. One quick question for you on the science wing is in the corridor where it's getting remodeled. Is the corridor staying the same width?
I think for the most part it is. They're kind of changing we're opening those CMU walls and putting in some more larger glass doors.
Right.
And they're kind of breaking up the sight line of it where you have kind of a porch area. So it's gonna look different, but I believe overall width is staying the same, but it's gonna feel bigger in a lot of those areas because all those locker rooms, or all the lockers, not the rooms, but the
Are gone. Right. Okay. And that's kind of what I was curious about, because it's going to have just that a totally different look. So, okay. Yep. Any other questions or comments related to Lee Summit High School? Thank you, sir.
All right. Well,
we appreciate it. All right. Okay, we are going to move on to item 10, items of information. These are our 4 written reports. So we had reports on curriculum revisions, our handbooks at the elementary and secondary level, and our bond budget updates. Does anybody have any comments related to the written reports? It's good. It's good. Board Member Fritchie.
Okay, I really didn't have any comments until Roderick brought up the 986 help number for technology, and then I was just wondering, because I kind of reviewed both the elementary and the secondary handbooks, and by the way, there's a ton of changes in those this year, but just updates and stuff like that, and I really appreciate all of the work that went into those. But my question is, I see Whitney Moorhead back there. And I was just wondering, do we have that 986 help number in our handbooks for our kids, for students, so they can have that to reference if they're like, oops, there's a problem with my Chromebook? I just wondered. I just think that'd be nice on that main phone numbers page that I see in the front of both the middle school and the high school plan books, if that might be possible to put that on. It's just for helpful reasons.
That's a good suggestion. Yeah, it's getting late. Any other comments on the written reports? Before we go, there is one last thing that we have to do here. And so, Dr. Buck, would you like this, or you want me? So we have 2 employees in the audience who this is their final board meeting, and we do want to recognize them. Dr. Buck said of your life, and so maybe that's a good news. So, Mr. Williams, Mr. Andrews, we wanted to recognize you for your years of service here and say thank you so much. So my fellow board members, if you wanted to add anything, that's fine, but we wanted to make sure and give them their recognition, and especially since we took 3.5 hours of your last board meeting. So sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry about that, Don and Steve. But you guys have been awesome, and and Don, we've got a long history, but you're a good guy, and I can't tell you how helpful it's been to have you back the last couple of years to stand in that spot again, to come back to that spot that you vacated and to do that work. And I'm pretty sure that our secondary principals really appreciated having you there. So, and Steve, it's been great to know you this year, and I wish you would have stuck around, but I wish you well.
Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all very much, board members. I'll see you in a couple days.